Chapter 112. Are you afraid? With both hands clasped behind his back, Yan turned his head and stared blankly at a small patch of sky outside the window. The sky was filled with a bright red glow. Layers of fish-scale clouds were spreading out, and flocks of birds were flying back and forth in the clouds at top speed. A few sky-patrolling eagle guards of scouting office were seen wheeling in the sky, their bodies shrouded in a faint blue glow. Occasionally, a bright gleam could be seen flickering in their eyes as they glanced down at the ground. Little fellow, I Yan own the land of Great Yin spanning hundreds of thousands of miles, over 100 vassal kingdoms, thousands of cities of different sizes that have yet to be built, and billions of people under my rule. I Yan have tens of millions of mighty soldiers, hundreds of thousands of cultivators, and tens of thousands of human immortals who have formed the Jin Dan. I Yan have been cultivating arduously for over 2,000 years, and my cultivation base has reached the limit of the Jin Dan realm. With just one more step, I will form my nascent soul, and I will have the hope of living a free and unfettered life. Taking a deep breath, Yan fixed his eyes on Wuxia, sneered and said, with such a strong power of the nation, and such a strong cultivation base, what is there for Yan to be afraid of? Looking at Yan solemn face, his flickering eyes, and the hesitation in his eyes, Wuxia took a deep breath and said, if you are not afraid, why is your majesty so nervous about the death of Duke Yanlu? Great Yin has been peaceful for over 2,000 years, but it doesn't mean that it will remain peaceful forever. Humans have their own emotions, and all kinds of gratitude and grudges will be entangled. Don't tell me that no one dares to assassinate Duke Yanlu? Wuxia continued, it is perfectly normal for Duke Yanlu to be assassinated. It could be done by any of the 8 princes, or any monarch of a vassal kingdom, or any member of the imperial clan, or any noble. It could also be that Yan Buji had stolen the wife of an expert, and was killed by that person as revenge. With the death of a duke from the imperial clan, why is your majesty so nervous? If that is not fear, then what is it? He smiled faintly, grabbed a jar of strong wine next to his feet, and gulped it down. After that, he burped and continued, your majesty has been cultivating for over 2,000 years, and you have already reached the limit of Gold Core realm? Jin Dan human immortals can live up to 800 years, and your majesty must have consumed countless life-prolonging spirit pills to live until now. However, when I saw your majesty riding on a flying sword a few days ago, the ripples of energy emanating from your majesty's body were as strong as the combined force of over 100 human immortals. He took a deep breath, stared straight into Yan Dan's eyes and cried out, if your majesty is not afraid of something, why does your heart feel so stagnant? His majesty's dermic power and cultivation base were comparable to the joint effort of over 100 human immortals of Gold Core realm. If it were someone else, he or she would have long formed 10 nascent souls. If your majesty is not, if you are not, unable to kill the devil in your heart, then why are you hesitating for so many years at the limit of the Jin Dan realm? Yan Dan, Jingku, Gao Jianli, and Qiqi took a deep breath. The joints in their bodies twisted and their muscles tightened, producing buzzing noises that sounded like the vibration of the strings of a zither. A strong dark green gleam shone from Yan Dan's eyes as he stared fixedly at Wuxia and said coldly, there is a devil in Yan Dan's heart? Why is Yan Dan not aware of it? After over 2,000 years of laborious cultivation, he still could not break through the Jin Dan realm, because. Yan Dan opened his mouth and stared blankly at the ceiling. He had nothing to say. A Jin Dan realm human immortal could live up to 800 years. Within 800 years, an ordinary cultivator would either form his nascent soul, transform into an earth immortal, and live a free and unfettered life, gaining an additional 3,000 years of life. Or they would have died long ago, leaving only a thread of their soul in the cycle of transmigration. However, no matter it was Yan Dan, Jingku, or Gao Jianli, the energy accumulated in their bodies was at least 100 times greater than that of an ordinary Jin Dan realm human immortal. Although their cultivation base was close to the extreme, they still could not break through their gold cores and form their nascent souls. If not because they were the few most important core members of Great Yin dynasty, and were supplied with a large amount of life-prolonging spirit herbs, Yan Dan and his companions would have turned into ashes over 1,000 years ago. So what if you already possess a formidable energy equivalent to a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator, when you were still in the Jin Dan realm? Since they could not form their nascent souls, their lifespan was only 800 years, and their overall strength could only be considered as an abnormal human immortal. Shaking his head, Wuxia gave Yandan a look, then turned to Jingku and Gao Jianli. The wind is blowing, the water is cold, and the brave warrior will never return. What a magnificent spirit! What a peerless hero! You have the courage to unleash a strike that can slay a dragon. To be able to sing such a song and do such a deed. Chief General and Deputy Prime Minister are both heroes, possessing great wisdom, courage, and willpower. So, why can't you see through that little devil in your heart and take another step forward? It is nothing more than breaking your gold core and forming your nascent soul. What is there to be afraid of? Just like Yandan, Gao Jianli had his mouth wide open, but he couldn't make any sound for a long while. On the other side, Jingku's eyes shone with a golden gleam. Suddenly he threw his head back and laughed. You're right, little boy. In those years, Lao Tzu dared to assassinate him with only a dagger in his hand. So what is there to be afraid of now? Your Majesty, the great yin you have now, is it the great yin of those years? You now have a mighty army of 10 million soldiers, and over 10 billion people. Are you still afraid of that man? In those years, we were able to fight with our lives on the line, let alone now? What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? Gao Jianli let out a long and loud cry as well. Vaguely, there was the sound of metal clashing, resounding through the clouds. He cried out sternly, what Jingku said is right. In those years, we were able to fight with our lives on the line. Not to mention that we are not necessarily weaker than him today. Your Majesty, don't you forget that after that man's death, he was deserted by all his people, and did not even have a trusted follower. On the other hand, we have this group of brothers, and the spirit of brotherhood. With us together, why should we be afraid of him? Both Jingku and Gao Jianli's clothes were ripped and torn at the same time, while large patches of skin on their bodies cracked and disintegrated. Vaguely, new skin as fair as jade was growing out from under their cracked skin, emitting a strong golden gleam. Vaguely, cracking noises could be heard coming from their dantian, while waves of powerful and suffocating energy kept rushing out from their bodies, rolling and rocking wantonly within the Tower of Heroes. Suddenly, a large sheet of bright light burst out from within the Tower of Heroes, as countless talismans and formation diagrams rushed out, tightly restraining the energy waves emanating from both men within the tower. Even though the inside of the tower had been thrown into a mess by the energy waves unleashed by Jingku and Gao Jianli, the people outside the tower did not feel anything. Suddenly, Qin Wuyang and Tian Guang threw their heads back, and let out a long and loud cry into the sky. Little boy, your words have awakened us. We are not the same as we were in the past. The man today is not the same as he was in the past. We have gone through all kinds of hardships to build the foundation we have today. And we are now at the peak of the power of the dynasty, with a strong army. So why should we be afraid of him? Tian Guang raised up a blue longsword, and sprayed out a stream of sword energy into the sky. The skin on his body exploded as well, while an enormous sword energy shot out from his dantian. Qin Wuyang's long hair stood straight up, while two strong beams shot out from his eyes that were as sharp as swords. A bright light flickered and flickered around his body. Just like the few others, he quickly entered the process of breaking his gold core and forming his nascent soul. Yandan stared blankly at Wuxia. After a long while, he suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, Wuxia, I never thought that you are actually the opportunity for us to break through the inner devil and become an earth immortal. Yes, what is Dan afraid of? Is he afraid of death? Many years ago, my head was chopped off by my father and sent to that man on a golden tray. My soul was roaring and roaring furiously in the head, but what could I do? I've already died once. Yet I still can't see through this after over 2,000 years of hard work. What a waste of 2,000 years of painstaking cultivation. An energy ripple that was much stronger and stronger than that of Jingku and the others was slowly rippling out from Yandan's body. The skin on Yandan's body was also breaking off piece by piece, revealing the newly born skin underneath that was as fair as jade and glowing with a dazzling glow. Yandan took a deep breath, murmuring to himself with a voice that sounded as if he was immersed in enjoyment. Come, come. If you are the same as Dan and have come to this place, let us continue our destined war. This time, Dan will definitely chop off your head, place it on a tray and admire it day and night. And this time, Dan will never lose to you again. The Great Yin Dynasty today is not the Great Yin Dynasty of the past. The Emperor of Great Yin Dynasty today is me, Ji Dan, and not that father of mine. Dan has brothers, a code of brotherhood, countless clans, tens of billions of people, a boundless land, tens of millions of mighty armies and countless generals. What is there for Dan to be afraid of? Laughing wildly, Yin Dan fished out a token of 8 swallows from his sleeve and threw it over to Wuxia, then cried out in a deep voice, "Ma'i, record this imperial decree. Confer Wuxia with the title of Marquis Tianyun of Great Yin Dynasty, and grant him 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty." Ma'i, with a red face and a height of over 10 feet, appeared out of nowhere and answered with a solemn expression. His eyes were filled with admiration and envy when he looked at Wuxia. With some nonsense, he had tricked a few of the most important people in Great Yin Dynasty into breaking their gold cores and forming their nascent souls, officially stepping into the realm of Earth Immortals. He had even given himself the title of Marquis Tianyun, granting him 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty. The luck of this Wuxia was so good that it was infuriating. Huayang Dynasty was the most famous land of fish and rice in Great Yin Dynasty, one of the commercial centers. Not only was it rich in products, the annual tax revenue was also an astronomical figure. Although Wuxia only granted 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty, the annual tax revenue from it was roughly equal to the income of 1/3 of an ordinary province. In Great Yin Dynasty, unless one was from a meritorious clan or a member of the imperial clan, it was extremely difficult for anyone to obtain the lowest title of nobility. How could it be as easy as Wuxia? With just a few words, he had become a marquis. Ma'i glared fiercely at Wuxia, whose face was filled with a smile, and narrowed his eyes. The ripples of energy emanating from Yin Dan's body were getting stronger and stronger, and the frequency was getting faster and faster. He forcefully suppressed the energy tide in his body, beckoned at the demon bear sitting on the platform and said, "Xiongqing, you and a few of your brothers will be working for Marquis Tianyun today. Be careful and work hard. Don't be greedy for wine. Don't hurt anyone without reason. And don't transform into a demon at midnight and fool around in the Beast Park of Imperial Palace. Do you understand?" The tall and burly man, Xiongqing, was struck dumb. With a frown on his face, he came next to Wuxia reluctantly, cupped his fist and bowed to Yin Dan with a low, muffled voice. Yin Dan smiled at Wuxia, pointed his finger at Xiongqing and said, "This fellow and his brothers are a total of 12 demon bears who have transformed into human form. Their skin and flesh are tough, and they can be of some use. You can use them as well. Let them work for you in the future." After assigning Xiongqing to Wuxia, Yin Dan's expression changed abruptly. Hastily, he ordered Wuxia and his men to leave at once. After that, a few beams flashed across the sky, as he, Jingku, and all the other men had transformed into beams and disappeared without a trace. When breaking the gold core, forming the nascent soul and stepping into the realm of Earth Immortal, there would be a thunder tribulation. No one knew where Yin Dan and his men had gone to, as they had to rely on the defensive formations that they had prepared beforehand to transcend the tribulation. So, how could they have the time to argue with Wuxia here? Wuxia weighed the token of 8 swallows in his hand, and couldn't help but let out a loud laugh. With this token, he could absolutely do whatever he wanted in Ji City, right? Then, he turned to look at Xiongqing, who had a reluctant expression on his face. This fellow had 11 brothers? And all of them were demon bears who had transformed into human form? That was a total of 12 demon bears who had formed the Jin Dan. Demons, these were real demons, and this was the first time in Wuqia's life that he had seen a demon that only existed in the legends. However, Wuxia had unintentionally offended this big black bear with his words just now. After pondering for a while, he patted on Xiongqing's shoulder. "Big brother Xiongqing, from now on you can follow Wuxia. You can eat big bowls of wine, eat big chunks of meat, and hack people with a big blade. Wuxia will guarantee you a happy life. After a brief pause, Wuqi let out a strange laugh and said, "With the token of 8 swallows, Big Brother Xiongqing can go to the Beast Park and fool around in the bear den at midnight. Wuqi will personally clear the way for you." Upon hearing what Wuqi said, Xiongqing, who had a belly full of anger just a moment ago, smiled sweetly and hugged Wuqi, calling him a good brother. Chapter 113. Deep in the night, a loud snoring that sounded like rolling thunder was heard coming out from Duke Yanli's mansion, shaking the ground and making it tremble slightly. Just now, when Wu Qi returned to the mansion, he briefly told Lu Chengfeng about what happened today. When Lu Chengfeng learned that Wu Qi was conferred the title of Marquis Tianyan by Yan Dan, and was given the fief of 130 cities, while also assigning 12 demon bears who had formed the Jin Dan to follow Wu Qi, he couldn't help but let out a loud cry of joy. Hastily, he ordered his men to prepare good wine and meat and serve them to him. A grand banquet was held in Duke Yanli's mansion to celebrate Wu Qi's great fortune today. As a result, under Wu Qi's intentional action, Lu Chengfeng, Xiongqing, and a few other men were half-dead drunk, and were now sleeping soundly in their rooms. The snoring that sounded like rolling thunder was coming from Xiongqing and his brothers. When these 12 demon bears were drunk, they would transform into bears. When 12 huge black bears, each with a height of 20 to 30 feet, were snoring together, the snoring would definitely make a man with a weak nervous system feel so painful that he would want to commit suicide. Wu Qi viciously speculated. Is this the reason why Yan Dan so generously threw Xiongqing and his brothers to me? From the lake in the backyard, Wu Qi sucked out a hazy layer of water vapor. Using the cover of the water vapor, he transformed into a sharp arrow and sped out of Duke Yanli's mansion, heading straight towards Mount White Sun outside the city. Upon leaving the city, Wu Qi took out a lower-tier magical item flying sword and transformed into a 3 feet long, blurry sword beam. Carefully sticking close to the bushes and trees, he flew all the way towards Mount White Sunday. While flying on the flying sword, Wu Qi kept marveling at what he had seen and heard today. Because of the devil in their hearts, Yan Dan and his brothers hadn't been able to break through the Jin Dan realm. Just a few words of nonsense had actually allowed them to successfully break through. He really didn't know what they had been cultivating for over 2,000 years. There were also the 12 Xiongqing brothers. They were monsters, real monsters, bear demons who had formed the Jin Dan. If they were on Earth, they would definitely be captured and dissected for research. They might even be locked in an iron cage, and have hundreds of milliliters of bear bile extracted every day. This was bear bile produced by a demonic bear that had turned into a spirit. Its effects were much stronger than those of ordinary black bears. Monsters, they really are monsters. Wu Qi sighed again and again. He was amazed by the wonders of this world. In the blue sky, thin layers of white clouds slowly floated by. A large number of stars dotted the sky, illuminating the world. Wu Qi rode on the sword light and flew against the wind in this quiet night. He felt as if he was floating and out of this world. What a marvelous and magnificent world! Suddenly, Wu Qi had a sudden realization. His footsteps were definitely not limited to this great Yan dynasty, but this tiny piece of sky. In the future, he would definitely follow the various records in Scroll of Stealing, visiting all kinds of magical places, visiting them, and visiting them. He wanted to stand at the peak of this world, and then enjoy all kinds of more magnificent and incredible wonders. Great Yan dynasty was just a beginning, and it was far from the end. Within the water meridians in both his arms, 2 water element Jin Dan kept rushing out pure and condensed energies. Driven by the energies, Wu Qi's flying speed was at least 2 times faster than the single-horned deer. In just 15 minutes, he had arrived at the front gate of Mount White Sunday. Without alerting anyone, he went straight into the mountain. The defensive formation of Mount White Sun was repaired by someone later on. The highest level of formation that could be mastered by the masters of formation in Great Yan Dynasty was merely 8 pillars, which barely reached the level of 8 trigrams formation. Heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect didn't have any formation masters trained by themselves, and the formation masters hired from outside didn't do their best to set up the mountain-protecting formation for heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect. They could only set up a reverse 5 elements heavenly fire and ice formation, which consisted of 5 main pillars. Wuqi simply ignored such a crude formation. He went through the defensive formation, avoided some small and exquisite defensive mechanisms, and carefully avoided a couple dozens of teams of heaven-breaking sword sect's disciples who were patrolling at night. Stealthily, Wuqi arrived at the foot of the main peak of Mount White Sunday. The surroundings were quiet and devoid of people. Wuqi took a deep breath. Suddenly, a large sheet of water vapor rippled around him, transforming into a few wisps of drifting clouds. They rolled him up and brought him up to the top of the cliff along with a gust of night breeze. Wuqi's body disappeared amidst the watery clouds. The watery cloud spell, a water elemental escape art from Scroll of Stealing, had concealed Wuqi's figure. His body transformed into a drifting cloud. And without alerting the large flock of white cranes on the cliff, he arrived at the top of the cliff. The top of the cliff, which was smashed by the thunderbolts unintentionally unleashed by Princess Zhongli during the day, had been filled up, and only the ancient pine trees that were smashed by the thunderbolts were nowhere to be seen. There was no one on the top of the cliff. Without hesitation, Wuqi raised his head and looked at the sky, then hastily leaped into the cave of sword stems from the mind, striding past the few layers of defensive mechanisms and formation diagrams. It was as if the triple-layered illusory formation on the outer layer was nothing to him, while under the skillful control of Wuqi's incantation, the formation formed by 108 pillars in the inner layer didn't play any role, and was easily crossed by him. At this moment, Wuqi's eyes glowed with a deep sense of gratitude towards the man who taught him the Scroll of Stealing. Without the profound knowledge of formations found in the Scroll of Stealing, how could he come into this place so easily? After all, this was the core region of heaven-breaking sword sect, the sect that ranked first among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yin Dynasty. Stealthily, Wuqi entered the cave. With a single step, he crossed the small river that was filled with an incredible amount of natural energies. He did not take the Jade Bridge, which was installed with at least 18 warning mechanisms. The cave was filled with natural energies, and the natural energies had condensed into a white mist, drifting in all directions. Transforming into a white cloud, Wuqi quickly took a round in the cave along with the white mist. Very soon, he found out what the people in the cave were doing. Nie Baihong was not in the cave, and he should have his own residence as the sect leader. There were 16 Jindan human immortals in the cave. Among them, 2 of them were mid-stage Jindan cultivators, while the other 14 had just formed their Jindan. Each of them had occupied a pavilion, sitting in meditation and circulating their energy, preparing for the nighttime cultivation of a cultivator. In the deepest part of the cave, in a small crafting room that was built into the mountain wall, Nie Yaonu was seen crafting 3 flying swords that were glowing with a fiery glow with the flame of magma from the Earth's core. As the energy of the magma from the Earth's core was too strong, the surging flame energy spread out in all directions, nearly dispersing the invisible watery cloud. Wuqi stole a glance at Nie Yaonu, who was wholeheartedly practicing her swords. After that, he dared not to look at her any longer, and hastily left the crafting room. With just a quick glance, Wuqi had a rough idea of Nie Yaonu's crafting level. All 3 flying swords were made from pretty good materials, and they were made from the red child iron of fire and thunder extracted from the magma from the Earth's core, which was at least 10,000 years old. It had an extremely strong and yang nature, and was the best material for crafting fire element magical treasures. However, the 3 flying swords crafted by Nie Yaonu could at most reach the standard of upper-grade magical treasures, as the materials and supplementary materials used did not match with them. Judging from the sweaty look on Nie Yaonu's face, Wuqi could tell that she had spent all her energy in crafting these 3 flying swords. However, crafting a magical treasure was a technical task that required talent and aptitude. Although Nie Yaonu had spent so much effort in crafting the swords, in the end, she could only craft 3 upper-grade magical treasures that were infinitely close to lower-grade magical treasures. With Wuqi's vision after inheriting the Scroll of Stealing, he would not even bother to steal upper-grade magical treasures. Shaking his head, Wuqi spun and entered the peerless pavilion of sword formation, walking slowly to the portrait of Immortal Zhen-Yi that was worshipped right in the middle of the pavilion. He gave Immortal Zhen-Yi a glance, who was riding on the back of a flood dragon, and had his face blurred. Wuxia bowed to him. Then a watery cloud rushed out from under his feet. Soundlessly, it carried him up to one of the pillars on the roof, and carefully approached the dustless lamp. There are 3 types of innate spirit items in a dustless lamp. If these 3 innate spirit items are left behind by immortal genie, then his tier is at least the same as the legendary primordial immortal. Those are innate spirit items. If he is not a primordial immortal, how could he get his hands on them? And how could he be so generous as to leave them behind for his juniors? However, the defensive formation left behind in the abode of a primordial immortal is really lousy. And the sword techniques left behind by him are missing the sword techniques of earth and fire. Is he trying to play a joke on his juniors? Although he left behind 3 innate spirit items, he is missing 2 sword techniques of 5 elements. I'm sure Yandan and his companions are the same Yandan I know, Jingku and Gao Jianli, who assassinated Emperor Qin. But how did they get here? Moreover, Yandan had said in the daytime that his head had been chopped off by his father and brought to the Qin emperor. His soul was still in his head, so he had seen everything clearly. He is already dead, so how could he still be here? While all kinds of thoughts were running through his mind, Wuxia was carefully dismantling the dustless lamp. With a flip of his palm, Wuxia exercised the hand of web soundlessly, absorbing a thread of innate earth element energy from the innate dust parting stone into his body, quickly storing it in the earth meridians in his arms. After that, he placed his palm close to the innate awakening wood element energy, absorbing the thread of innate wood element energy and storing it in the wood meridians in his arms. After harvesting the earth and wood innate energies, Wuxia felt his body was filled with a refreshing feeling. Upon entering his body, the 2 threads of innate earth element energy began to fuse with his corporeal body. The innate earth element energy made Wuxia's corporeal strength stronger and stronger, and the innate wood element energy made his body more resilient, and the life force contained in his body more vigorous. In addition to that, the innate wood element could generate wind, and the wind and rain could turn into thunder, which made Wuxia's agility and the explosive force of his muscles improve bit by bit. Finally, all that was left was the most powerful and rarest divine flame of order. With 70% caution, Wuxia carefully extracted a thread of innate fire element energy from the divine flame of order, and fused it into his fire meridians. After that, he clenched his jaws and took a deep breath, then unleashed his divine sense from his forehead, sucking the thumb-sized, 1 foot and 2-inch long purple-green divine flame into his spiritual ocean. A vast purple-green divine flame exploded crazily in Wuxia's vast spiritual ocean, sending countless sparks in all directions. Suddenly, a huge wave emerged from the several thousand feet long pool of water in Wuxia's spiritual ocean, quickly wrapping around the rampaging divine flame, and forcefully merging all the sparks back into one. Wuxia's spiritual energy was being consumed at an incredible speed. He kept using his spiritual energy to form one profound rune after another in his spiritual ocean, cooperating with the water waves in his spiritual ocean to suppress the divine flame of order. All these runes came from the inheritance of Scroll of Stealing, and were specialized in restraining all yang and yin flames under the heaven, both tangible and intangible. It was the most ingenious divine art of controlling fire under the heaven. 108 crimson runes formed purely from his divine sense wrapped tightly around the divine flame of order in his spiritual ocean. Finally, Wuxia breathed out a sigh of relief. Looking at the dustless lamp, which was still in perfect condition, apart from the 3 innate energies which were stolen by Wuxia and the divine flame of order, Wuxia hastily took out all kinds of materials he bought from Market of Four Seas during the daytime from his storage ring. Using the oil of the merman, which could last for 10,000 years as the wick, and a few other materials as the auxiliary materials, a thread of purple-green flame once again burned in the dustless lamp. After that he used the soul-breaking worm, the dust barrier, golden spider silk, and some other materials to construct a small restrictive formation on the dustless lamp. With that, Wuxia had successfully completed the task of stealing the innate spirit items. Using these rare and precious items as the materials, he constructed a restrictive formation that could keep away the dust and calm the mind, which could unleash about 30% of the original dustless lamp's effect. As long as the oil of the merman did not dry up, No one would ever find out that the dustless lamp was not the original one. However, a single drop of the oil could burn for 100 years. Therefore, Wuxia had added 200 grams of the oil into the dustless lamp, which would allow the lamp to burn for 10,000 years. Therefore, he did not have to worry that someone would find out that the dustless lamp was stolen in a short period of time. After giving a satisfied look at the restrictive formation he constructed, Wuxia stealthily transformed into a wisp of cloud and flew out of Mount White Sunday. Chapter 114. Early morning. Last night, when Princess Zhonglu returned to the imperial palace, because of the quarrel she had with Xiongqing, Princess Zhonglu was in a bad mood. She threw her head back and let out a long and loud cry into the sky. As a result, the entire Ji city was hit by a thunderstorm for the entire night. Early in the morning, perhaps it was because Princess Zhonglu's mood had recovered, the clouds had dispersed and the rain had stopped. The sky in the east was now glowing with a red hue. It was another fine day. A night of wind and rain had washed the Ji city clean and pleasant. The air was filled with fresh water vapor. Wuxia was standing on the rooftop, facing the east and regulating his breath. He was in a great mood, feeling that every single cell in his body was cheering excitedly. The four innate energies of earth, wood, fire, and water were flowing ceaselessly in the meridians in both his arms. The heaviness of earth, the vigor of wood, the warmth of fire, and the lightness of water. These four wonderful sensations were rolling and rocking inside his body. Vaguely, a four-colored auspicious gleam could be seen flashing in Wuqi's eyes, and his entire body was filled with a powerful force. It had been 1 month since he found the 3 innate spirit items in the dustless lamp. Because of the foundation of the water chapter, and the fact that he had formed 2 water element Jindan in his water meridians, Wuqi's speed in cultivating the source of earth chapter, fire chapter, and wood chapter had been progressing at a tremendous pace. Every single day, he would make great progress. Currently, these 3 cultivation techniques had all reached the stage of meridian nurturing, and his meridians had been carefully tempered by the innate energies of 3 different elements for over 100 times. As a result, the strength and flexibility of Wuqi's meridians had nearly reached the standard of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. At this moment, standing on the rooftop, facing the morning sun in the east, he was absorbing and spitting out the first thread of innate purple energy that was produced by the heaven and earth every day. The airflow was rolling and rolling around Wuqi's body, making him feel like he was about to soar into the sky and soar into the sky. After a full quarter of an hour, when the rising sun rose from the eastern horizon, emitting a boundless red light that illuminated the world, Wuqia slowly stopped his cultivation. 3 streams of white smoke spurted out from his mouth and nostrils, and only slowly dissipated after reaching a distance of over 10 feet. Lu Qingfeng leaped onto the roof and hastily did some breathing exercises facing the east. Then he rubbed his sleepy eyes and let out a long sigh. In the future, it would be best if Xiongqing and Princess Zhonglu don't meet each other. That boorish fellow offends people easily with his words. If you hadn't stopped him yesterday, Princess Zhonglu would have hacked him to pieces. After stretching his body, Wuqia sent his soul sense into the storage ring. Looking at the various top-grade spirit stones piled up like a mountain inside, Wuqia said indifferently, "It's okay, it's okay. Princess Zhonglu's face is disgusting and soft. She said she wanted to kill someone, but she couldn't do it. She also knows that Xiongqing and his brothers are a bunch of brainless idiots. Why would she care about them?" The storage ring was filled with top-grade spirit stones of the 5 elements: gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. Some of these spirit stones came from the spirit stone mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory. Some were gifts from the 130 cities of Huaiyang, Wuqi's current fief, and some were secretly given to Wuqi by Princess Zhonglu this month. She knew that Wuqi was practicing the qi circulating technique of 5 elements of heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect. Fearing that Wuqi's progress would be slow, she hurriedly gave a lot of spirit stones of the 5 elements to Wuqi. A beauty's kindness is the hardest to bear. Wuqi looked at the various spirit stones in the ring, feeling a bit happy but distressed. He made up his mind that if Xiongqing talked nonsense after drinking again, saying that he wanted Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu to get on the bed and have babies, he would definitely find an iron rod himself. and let Xiongqing know what pain in the ass was. You could have said this to me in private. Why did you talk nonsense in front of Princess Zhanglu? She's a young girl. You, a boorish bear spirit, are asking for trouble. Thinking of Xiongqing and his brothers, who were struck by a series of thunderbolts last night, Wuqi could only shake his head. Lu Chengfeng also stretched his back. Looking at a flock of birds flying high in the sky, he said with a smile, "That's true. Princess Zhanglu clearly knows what kind of people Xiongqing and his brothers are, so she won't really do anything to them. Xiongqing and his brothers, after all, are imperial high officials personally conferred by His Majesty. Aren't they afraid that Princess Zhanglu will really order them to be beheaded? They don't care if they suffer some physical pain." While the two of them were discussing how Xiongqing's words last night had caused Princess Zhanglu to fly into a rage, the sounds of Xiongqing and his brothers doing their morning exercises could be heard coming from the backyard below. 12 mutated violent bears, ranging from 20 to 30 feet in height, with bodies covered in scales and black fur, had reverted to their original forms. They were grinding their teeth and rubbing their palms together as they pounced on each other in the backyard. The beautiful backyard had been smashed into pieces, and the ground was shaking faintly as if there was an earthquake. Xiongqing and his brothers were doing their morning exercises, as if they were fighting their mortal enemies. They exerted all their strength in every move they made, which made Wu Qi's eyes twitch. A loud boom rang out, as Xiongqing's youngest brother, Xiong Bubao, was sent flying nearly 1,000 feet away by a bear paw from his 3 elder brothers. He immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood. Lu Chengfeng shuddered when he saw this. Unconsciously, he leaped off the roof and spun away. These boorish fellows were addicted to fighting again. Once they went mad, they would attack with all their strength, regardless of who they were. Lu Chengfeng, who had nearly been killed by them a few times, no longer dared to stay near them. Looking at Xiong Bubao's miserable state, Wu Qi shuddered and hastily spun and fled. While chasing after Lu Chengfeng, Wu Qi shouted, "Today, Zhuguozheng Mansion will have to make a decision regarding the fight between the Gaoling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom for the gold mine in the upper reaches of Zhonglang River. Should the gold mine be divided between the Gaoling Kingdom or the Lishan Kingdom, or should they share it equally? We need to come up with a solution as soon as possible. The 300,000 soldiers of both kingdoms have been facing each other across the river, and the war is about to break out." Lu Chengfeng halted his steps, his brows knitted into a tight frown. While walking side by side, both men were discussing how to handle this matter. As the Zhuguozheng of Great Yin Dynasty, he was responsible for supervising and mediating all kinds of state affairs for the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west of Great Yin Dynasty. When two kingdoms were fighting over various mineral resources, they would need to be mediated by the Prime Minister's office of the suzerain kingdom. However, such disputes usually involved great benefits, and the parties involved were not two individuals, but two vassal kingdoms with formidable national forces. If the dispute was not handled properly, it would bring about a great trouble. While discussing along the way, Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng were having a headache. The case of two kingdoms fighting over the gold mine was submitted to them half a month ago. However, the information submitted was vague and unclear, and they couldn't even figure out which kingdom the forest in the upper reaches of Zhonglang River belonged to. With such a case, how could Lu Chengfeng make a judgment? After discussing for some time, when they were about to reach the main entrance of Duke Yanli's mansion, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, spread his arms, sneered and said, "Why don't we do it this way? Didn't both sides send out an army of 300,000 soldiers? Let the 300,000 soldiers start the war. With a time limit of 3 days, we'll divide the profit of the gold mine according to the number of soldiers who died in the war. This will be fair and reasonable." Upon hearing Wu Qi's extremely irresponsible words, Lu Chengfeng nearly fell to the ground. He glared angrily at Wu Qi from the corner of his eyes, scolded in a low voice, "Are you afraid that His Majesty won't find fault with me? This idea, I can't do it, I can never do it." Wu Qi shrugged and shook his head disapprovingly. Speaking of Yandan, Wu Qi found it strange as well. Over a month ago, Yandan and his company had indeed entered the process of breaking their gold core and forming their nascent soul. Over the past few days, Yan Dan had officially started attending the imperial court, but there was no news about him, Jingku and his company forming their nascent souls. Could it be that they had purposely concealed this fact? Although Wuxia had his doubts about this, he was not stupid enough to ask around about it. He just kept it in the bottom of his heart, quietly waiting to see what Yan Dan and his company were going to do next. When Princess Zhang formed her Jin Dan, there was a great celebration. But this time, when so many of them formed their nascent souls at the same time, nothing happened. It was really strange. With these questions in mind, Wuxia walked out from the main entrance of Duke Yanli's mansion, and happened to see a row of pitch-black coaches speeding towards Duke Yanli's mansion on the main street in front of the mansion. Along the way, the coaches shouted at a few ministers who were about to rush to their own office, and came straight to the main entrance with an unbridled arrogance. Those ministers who were yelled at and forced to bring their guards to the side of the road seemed to have recognized the owner of the coaches. Their faces were filled with resentment, and they kept running far away from them. There were even a few ministers who kept throwing their glances over, pointing their fingers at Duke Yanli's mansion, and discussing something. Looking at the coaches, Wuxia coughed lightly. Then, Zhang Hu and Hu Wei led a large group of guards and rushed down the stairs, stopping before the coaches. Luo Kadi and Ma Liang stood on the left and right side of Lu Chengfeng, shielding him. Luo Kadi cried out sternly, "Who are you? Stop the coaches at once. This is Duke Yanli's mansion. No one is allowed to cause trouble here." The coaches behaved rudely. Although Zhang Hu and a few other guards were standing before the coaches, they still acted as if they couldn't rein in the reins and continued galloping several tens of feet forward, forcing Zhang Hu and his men to back off until they reached the stairs in front of the mansion. Four crocatas pulled by the black coach at the front came to the top of the stairs in front of Duke Yanli's mansion, and only then did they stop slowly while snorting angrily. Wuxia glared at them. A cold gleam flashed across his body as he drew out the sword of Greedy Wolf and was about to swing it down. But Lu Chengfeng had already taken a few steps forward, staring at the coach that was about to rush up the stairs, and cried out, "Don't you think you are being too arrogant and domineering? What are you trying to do by driving straight into my mansion?" The doors of those coaches suddenly opened, and a couple dozens of guards clad in black armor walked out in a single file. A crimson-red carpet rolled out from one of the coaches in the middle. An old man with a fat head and big ears, clad in a golden imperial robe and holding a silver walking stick in his hand, walked out slowly on the carpet. The old man raised his head and looked at Wuxia and Lu Chengfeng. He coughed lightly, then shook his hand and threw a wooden box, about 1 foot in diameter, towards Lu Chengfeng. Lu Chengfeng moved his body and dodged the black wooden box. Wuxia took a step forward, caught the wooden box, and opened it without hesitation. A white silk cloth was placed inside the wooden box, and on top of it was placed a human head, whose skin was red and pale, looking like a living person. Judging from the appearance of the human head, it was a young man in his 20s. He was handsome and valiant, and had the face of a pretty boy. However, when such a handsome face was placed in the wooden box, it gave off a strange aura. Wuqi's face darkened. He stared at the fat old man and said angrily, "Sending a dead head so early in the morning? Are you trying to bring us bad luck?" The fat old man coughed again, gazed at Wuqi from the corner of his eyes arrogantly, and said in an indifferent tone, "So, you are Marquis Tianyan. Hehe, until now no one in Ji City knows why His Majesty suddenly conferred the title of Marquis to a nobody like you. However, it is said that Marquis Tianyan has a peerless luck, and it seems that it is true." The fat old man sneered, then said in a deep voice, "This human head is the head of Taba Muxiang, the head of my nephew." With a strange expression, the fat old man gazed at Lu Chengfeng, then said, "Duke Yanlu, please tell that mad dog, Qin Qing Shui, that I have nothing to do with the death of Duke Yanlu, Buji, and that he should never trouble me again. In order for Taba Muxiang to inherit the position left behind by Duke Yanlu, my eldest son, Taba Qingye, was killed. If that Qin Qing Shui dares to trouble me again, don't blame me for not letting him go." Taba Muxiang? Taba Qingye? Suddenly Wuqi knew who this old man was. Chapter 115. The Duke of Xian Taba Ao. was the current monarch of Xian Kingdom. He was the biological father of Tuoba Haofeng and the dead Taba Qingye, the monarch of Xian Kingdom. He ruled over 38 provinces of Xian Kingdom, 943 magnificent cities, and an army of 1 million armored soldiers. Among the over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty, he could be ranked in the top 3. According to the secret files of Scouting Office of Great Yan Dynasty, when Taba Ao was still a child, a rebellion happened in the palace. His mother was poisoned to death, and when Taba Ao was just 2 months old, he was brought out of the palace by a loyal palace maid. The palace maid was hunted down and fell off a cliff, while Taba Ao was raised by a group of moon-howling divine mastiffs, until he was 3 years old. Only then was he found by the previous Duke of Xian Kingdom. As he grew up in a group of mastiffs, Taba Ao had a rude and unreasonable nature. Among all the vassals of Great Yan Dynasty, he was the most unreasonable one, and had a murderous nature. Just look at his title. As the Duke of Xian had the name Ao in his name, the imperial clan of Xian Kingdom could do nothing to him. Although the Great Yan Dynasty had some complaints about this, there was nothing they could do to him. Early in the morning today, he brought a group of guards and stormed into Duke Yan Li's mansion, bringing the head of his own nephew to their doorstep. What a barbaric and cruel way of doing things. Wuxia stared at Taba Ao, whose face was trembling with ferocity. His face turned unsightly. The head of Taba Muxiang in his hand seemed to have become heavy as well. Taba Ao gazed viciously at Wuxia and Lu Chengfeng, then said with a ferocious voice, Taba Muxiang is the illegitimate son of my sister in Yanbuji. My sister gave birth to a child out of wedlock, and if this news were to spread out, it would be bad for my reputation. Therefore, I raised him in the palace with the identity of a legitimate son. When Yanbuji drowned in the river, I admit that I coveted the title of Duke Yanlu. And that's why I came up with a plan for Taba Muxiang. Am I wrong? Clenching his jaws tightly, he glared at Wuqi and Lu Chengfeng, who had an unsightly expression on their faces. Taba Ao grinned hideously and said, Since Duke Chengfeng is able to inherit the title of Duke Yanlu, could it be that your hands are completely clean, without any blood stains? Everyone was the same, so why did they have to hold on to this reason? For the sake of the title of Duke Yanlu, my eldest son, Taba Qingye, has been killed by you. And now, I've presented you with the head of the culprit, Taba Muxiang. If anyone dares to pester me with this matter again, don't blame me for being rude to him. 2 streams of tears rolled down his cheeks as Taba Ao threw his head back and let out a long cry. Taba Qingye, Taba Muxiang, you 2 lowly bastards, you deserve to die. Stamping his feet on the ground, Taba Ao let out a loud shout of damn it for over 10 times, attracting the attention of all the ministers and princes who happened to be passing by. After that, he slammed his walking stick on the ground, turned around and entered the coach. A loud voice rang out, and the guards of Xiangua entered the carriages one after another. The coachman scolded them, and the black carriages turned around, and went back the way they came. Lu Chengfeng was so angry that his face turned blue. He scolded in a low voice, domineering, really unscrupulous. Even though he is the monarch of Xiangua, and is so arrogant and domineering, has he forgotten that Xiangua is also under my rule? His Xiangua is also one of the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west. Then he stomped his foot on the stairs, shattering a few feet wide stone brick into powder soundlessly. Lu Chengfeng gnashed his teeth and said, Taba Ao and I will never let go of the humiliation we suffered today. Xiangua, Xiangua. Does he think he has the right to present the head of Taba Muxiang to us? Weighing the head in his hand, Wuqi casually handed it over to Lu Chengfeng. Lu Chengfeng was stunned. Then he took over the head and held it close to his chest. He stared at Wuqi and said in a low voice, Sending a head here so early in the morning, could it be that Qin Qingshui has pushed him too hard? But why did Qin Qingshui force him to do something? Do you still remember that night? It was obvious that Qin Qingshui was cooperating with Taba Qingye to set us up. Why is he finding trouble with Taba Ao now? Wuqi pondered for a while. Then he shook his head, frowned and said, Taba Ao said that Qin Qingshui is a mad dog, who can never guess his thoughts. Young master, you can go ahead and discuss some important matters in Zhuguozheng's mansion. As for the conflict between the Gaoling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom, just drag it out. Wuqi has some thoughts here, and I'll explain them to young master in detail when I get back. Laughing coldly, Wuqi nodded his head at Lu Qingfeng, spun and entered Duke Yan Li's mansion. He walked along the wall for a while, glanced to the left and right, then leaped over the wall nimbly, following the main street and chasing towards the direction where Taba Ao's convoy left. Standing in front of the Duke mansion, Lu Qingfeng held the head in his arms and stared blankly for a while. Suddenly, he angrily threw the head over to Yan Fu, asking him to bury it properly. After that, he angrily boarded the coach, brought a large group of guards and headed straight towards the direction of Zhuguozheng's mansion. Following closely behind Lu Qingfeng, Yan Bugui subconsciously looked towards the direction where Taba Ao left, then turned to look at Wu Qi's back. Hastily, he gave a signal using a unique hand signal used by secret agents of Scouting Office. A few passers-by on the street who seemed to be passing by unintentionally turned around and left slowly. When they were over 1,000 feet away from Duke Yan Li's mansion, they suddenly sped up and plunged into an alley beside the street, chasing after Taba Ao's convoy. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, through countless large and small networks in G City, the news of Taba Ao paying a visit to Duke Yanlu early in the morning and presenting the head of his nephew, Taba Muxiang, the half-brother of Duke Yanlu Lu Qingfeng, had been spread across the entire G City. Those influential nobles who knew Taba Ao's usual behavior just smiled when they heard the news. The wild temperament of Taba Ao, who was raised in a pack of mastiffs, had once again broken out. Taba Ao's convoy was running amok on the long street of G City, and countless innocent passers-by had been injured. They had nearly circled half a circle around the 6 inner cities of G City, passing through several dozens of streets and alleys, and finally came to a stop in a desolate and deserted alleyway. There were already 3 convoys waiting in the alleyway, each with a different appearance and painted with different colors. With a gloomy face, Taba Ao alighted from the coach, randomly picked one of the convoys and got on it. After that, he gave a light shout and 4 convoys left the alleyway slowly, disappearing into the endless stream of people on the street. The convoy of convoys took a detour on the street for a while, and finally came straight to the clubhouse built by Xian Kingdom in G City. This was also the place where the hostages of Xian Kingdom usually stayed. Wu Qi wasn't fooled by Taba Ao's camouflage. He kept his eyes fixed on Taba Ao's convoy, quietly following behind him as they circled around G City. Along the way, he discovered that wherever the convoy passed by, there were at least nearly 1,000 spies observing the movements of Taba Ao's convoy. Wu Qi saw with his own eyes that at least 18 secret agents and informers of Scouting Office were discovered by these informers who had been planted by Xian Kingdom in advance. They were entangled with them with all sorts of methods, causing them to lose control of Taba Ao. Fortunately, Wu Qi had an excellent tracking skill, and he also had an excellent hiding method. As a result, none of the spies of Xian Kingdom could discover his existence. Wu Qi kept his eyes fixed on Taba Ao, and followed him to a mansion located at the northwest corner of the inner second city, which was close to the palace city. The mansion was not big, but it was quiet and secluded. Not far away from it was the office of Great Yan's Scouting Office's Central Wind Guard. The street was densely packed with secret agents of Central Wind Guard and soldiers of G City's City Defense Army. Most of the people who came and went on this street were officials related to Scouting Office, and some vagabonds in the marketplace. There were all kinds of people, and it looked very complicated. The mansion occupied an area of approximately tens of acres, and the front and back of the mansion were planted with strange pines and cypresses. Ancient trees with trunks that looked like coiling dragons covered the entire mansion. From the outside of the mansion, one could only see the lush greenery that stretched like clouds, and there was no way one could see what was happening in the courtyard. On top of these towering trees, on average, there was a spy clad in a green cloak hiding in each of them. These vigilant spies had formed an impenetrable net, blocking off all possible directions for Wu Qi to sneak in. Yet there was not a single blind spot for anyone to sneak into the courtyard. Hiding on top of a tall building a few courtyards away, Wu Qi twitched his lips and shook his head helplessly. The defense of this courtyard was indeed impenetrable. If it was Wu Qi 1 month ago, He would have no way to sneak into this place stealthily. But now, laughing coldly, Wuxia performed an incantation gesture. Abruptly, his body transformed into a sheet of misty green light and shadow, and noiselessly leaped into the air, and plunged into a huge tree in the courtyard. After obtaining the innate wood element aura, and starting to cultivate the source of wood chapter, Wuxia was able to exercise the innate wood element escape art. Using the huge trees in the courtyard as his cover, without alerting anyone, he easily sneaked into the courtyard, followed Taba Ao and came to a side courtyard. Underneath a few large pine trees, there was a rack of grapevines growing thickly. Clad in a black brocade robe and barefoot, Qin Qingshui was having his body massaged by two beautiful teenage girls. When he heard Taba Ao's footsteps, he lazily opened his eyes, greeted Taba Ao and said, "Duke Xian, how is it going? Now that I've delivered the head of Taba Muxiang to you, you have nothing to do with this matter anymore. Can you put your mind at ease now?" Taba Ao snorted coldly, strode next to Qin Qingshui and sat down on a couch. Fuming with rage, he clenched his fists and growled in a low voice, "When have I, Taba Ao, ever suffered such humiliation in my entire life? Qingye is dead, and in order to clear his name, he even killed Muxiang himself. Hao Feng has also been marked by His Majesty. In the future, he will inherit the throne of the Xian Kingdom, and perhaps he will face more troubles." Viciously cursing Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng's 18 generations of ancestors, Taba Ao said furiously, "Qin Qingshui, find a way to kill a few trusted subordinates of that kid, or else, I can't swallow this anger." Qin Qingshui laughed mockingly, threw a sideways glance at Taba Ao and said, "You should be content with what you have. By sacrificing Taba Qingye and Taba Muxiang, you can easily extricate yourself from this matter. Using the weapons of the City Defense Army and the City Defense Mechanism to assassinate the descendants of the Imperial clan, such a serious crime can be absolved with the death of a son and a nephew. What else do you want from such a cheap thing?" Fiercely grabbing the chest of the girl standing next to him, Qin Qingshui said in a vexed tone, "I still have a big trouble waiting for me. His Majesty has asked me to find out who is the culprit behind this case. But who is the culprit? If I can't find a scapegoat and am forced to live in seclusion, Duke Xian will become a deaf and blind man in Ji City." Taba Ao's face turned extremely gloomy. He rose to his feet, glared at Qin Qingshui, sneered and said, "No matter what methods you use, you have to deal with this matter properly. I've already lost a son and a nephew. If you are forced to live in seclusion, you have to spit out everything that you've eaten and taken from me all these years. Do you think my gold, silver, jewelry, beautiful girls, and mansions are so easy to enjoy?" He gave Qin Qingshui a fierce glare, whose face had turned dark, then spun and said coldly, "Remember, this matter ends here. Muxiang didn't get the title of Duke Yanlu, so don't drag me into this matter. You, Qin Qingshui, have taken my money, but you didn't help me get the title of Duke Yanlu. I won't ask for the money back, but you have to clean up the mess." Then, Taba Ao strode out from the courtyard and warned with a deep voice, "I don't want His Majesty to know that this matter is related to me. I didn't send anyone to assassinate Yan Buji, and I also didn't send anyone to assassinate the current Duke, Yanlu, to help Taba Muxiang fight for the title of Duke. All these have nothing to do with me." Taba Ao left the mansion. Qin Qingshui remained silent for a long while, then suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Ing Chuan, come out now. I have something to tell you." Wu Qi, who was hiding in the crown of a huge tree, felt his heart skip a beat. Ing Chuan? Which Ing Chuan? Princess Ing Chuan of the Lu Kingdom. Chapter 116. A sweet moan was heard coming from a small and exquisite abode behind the grape trellis. A fragrant scent drifted in the air, as a naked, beautiful lady walked slowly out of the abode. She was clad in a pink veil. It looked like she had just taken a bath, as there were still crystal-clear water droplets on her long hair, and on her exposed chest, there were droplets of water slowly sliding down. From Wu Qi's angle, he couldn't see the lady's face clearly. He could only see her slender waist twisting and turning like a water snake as she came next to Qin Qingshui. Then, she plopped herself down on Qin Qingshui's chest and intimately hugged Qin Qingshui's neck. Then, she gave Qin Qingshui a heavy kiss on his face, then called out intimately, "Grand Marquis Qin, is that fat pig just now the Duke of Xian?" Qin Qingshui pulled off the veil from the lady's body, grabbed and pinched her body with both hands and said, "Cut the nonsense. Among the hanger-ons of Duke of Yan, are Luo Kadi and Ma Liang your former subordinates? Is there any way to control them? If there is, frame Duke Yan Lu, push the blame of Yan Buji's murder onto him and his mother's clan. With that, you can solve my current predicament, and you can avoid the disaster of the Lu Kingdom's downfall." Upon hearing Qin Qingshui's words, Wuxia immediately understood the identity of this beautiful lady. She was indeed Princess Yingchuan of the Lu Kingdom, the birth mother of Marquis Lu Suifeng, and the former mistress of Luo Kadi and Ma Liang. What was strange was that the Lu Kingdom was very far away from Ji City, and it had only been a little over a month since Lu Chengfeng inherited the title of Duke of Yan. So, how could she arrive at Ji City in such a timely manner? Princess Yingchuan breathed out a sigh, grumbled bitterly and viciously. Those two scoundrels who betrayed their master, what can we expect from them? Now that Lu Chengfeng has inherited the title of Duke Yanlu, he has a group of followers from the imperial clan, and he holds great power in his hands. How can Yingchuan still control them? I think they have long forgotten the look of their mistress. She twisted her body a few times on Qin Qingshui's body, then said with a sweet voice, "Marquis Di Qinghui, Grand Marquis, you are the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard. Can't you fabricate some evidence and push the crime of Yan Buji's murder onto Lu Chengfeng? As long as we can ascertain that it was that bitch Tai Yuewu who was the mastermind behind the assassination of Yan Buji, the scouting office will confiscate the entire Tai clan and kill all the people involved." Princess breathed out a sigh. Princess opened her lips and slowly, Princess, and Princess Qin, and Princess, from Qin Yan, and Ling Ling King from the palace, Princess from the sea Qin, from Qin Yuling. While gently kissing Qin Qingshui's body, Princess Yingchuan said with a soft voice, "Before Tai Yuewu returned to the Lu Kingdom, Tai clan had become extremely arrogant. Currently, that old fogey Marquis Yuanyang is reorganizing his army and preparing for a rebellion. Lord Marquis, the Lu Kingdom gives Lord Marquis so much every year. Lord Marquis must not let the Tai clan take over the Lu Kingdom's foundation." All of a sudden, Princess Yingchuan kissed Qin Qingshui's vital part. Qin Qingshui's shriveled donkey-like face suddenly turned snow-white. The blood on his face had long been sucked away. His skinny body tensed up as he gritted his teeth and growled in a low voice, "Do you think I don't know? But how am I supposed to frame him? The Lu Kingdom was just a third-rate kingdom among all the vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty. How could a mere Tai clan have the power to assassinate Yan Buji? Is Yan Buji really that easy to kill? Not only him, but the other former supervisor, rear supervisor, and right supervisor have all been killed 100 times over." Panting heavily, Qin Qingshui held Princess Yingchuan's head in his arms, clenched his jaws and said, "The lords of the four great kingdoms are in charge of the supervision of over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty. They hold a high position and hold great power. Countless monarchs of vassal kingdoms have their eyes on them. Not to mention a mere Marquis Yuanyang from your Lu Kingdom. Even if Duke of Xian wanted to assassinate Yan Buji, it would not be so easy. The water in this matter is very deep." Wuqi looked at Qin Qingshui's little body tensed up. He straightened all 10 fingers, then slowly bent them one by one. When Wuqi bent the last finger, about the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Qin Qingshui's body suddenly trembled, and his snow-white donkey-like face suddenly turned purplish red. Suddenly, hot sweat broke out from his body. Panting heavily, he held Princess Yingchuan's head tightly in his arms. His body was trembling unconsciously, and only after a long while did he let out a moan that sounded like a dying man, and slowly relaxed his body. Princess Yingchuan raised her head up with a charming smile on her face, and just happened to let Wuqi see half of her face. She was indeed an extraordinarily beautiful woman. Although she had already raised Lu Suifeng, who was a grown-up son, Princess Yingchuan still looked young like a 16-year-old beauty, and her beautiful face was very attractive, especially her identity as the daughter of the Lu Kingdom's monarch. It could make one's imagination run wild. Lovingly, Qin Qingshui stroked Princess Yingchuan's face and said with a low voice, "It's not going to work if you want to put the blame on them. We need to find a suitable person to do it. His Majesty has already paid attention to the case of Yan Buji's assassination. If I dare to act recklessly in this case, and don't come up with some solid and credible evidence, I won't even know how I died one day." Princess Yingchuan's beautiful brows knitted into a tight frown. With a piteous expression, she looked at Qin Qingshui, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Marquis, you're the chief supervisor of the Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office, a person who holds great power in his hand. Can't you find a way to frame someone else? If we don't get rid of that bitch, Tai Yuewu, and the Tai clan behind her, Yingchuan will have no home to return to in the future. If the Lu Kingdom really changes its surname to Tai, what should we do if Marquis changes his name to Yingchuan?" Intentionally or unintentionally, a stream of crystal-clear liquid flowed down from the corner of Princess Yingchuan's mouth. It was unknown what kind of seductive technique she had used, but even Wuxia, who was lying on top of the tree, could feel his heart skip a beat, and a scorching heat was bursting out from his lower abdomen. Since he had stolen the enormous kidney energies from both of Qin Shuwen's kidneys, the strength of Wuqi's kidneys had become very strong. As soon as the flame in his heart was ignited, his lower body immediately stood erect like iron, causing Wuqi, who was lying on top of the tree, to feel extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, the divine flame of order in Wuqi's spiritual ocean was extremely magical. As soon as the evil flame was ignited, it immediately emitted a greenish-purple light and shone upon Wuqi's spiritual ocean. Waves of scorching heat flowed from his spiritual ocean to his entire body, and in just a blink of an eye, it circled 3 times around Wuqi's body. The flame in his heart that was ignited by Princess Yingchuan's unknown seductive technique was instantly extinguished, and Wuqi's body quickly returned to normal. Beads of cold sweat broke out on Wuqi's forehead. The seductive technique of Princess Yingchuan was indeed incredible. While he was praising Princess Yingchuan's seductive technique, a couple of men, clad in green cloaks, suddenly fell down from the branches of a dozen ancient pine trees in the courtyard. Each of these men was staring at Princess Yingchuan with an infatuated look. Some of them even had their faces blushed, howling and leaping towards Princess Yingchuan. Princess Yingchuan let out a soft cry, as her petite body suddenly curled up into a ball and shrunk into Qin Qingshui's arms. Qin Qingshui flew into a rage. He snapped sternly, "A bunch of useless fools. What's the use of me keeping you here? Do you think I want you to make a fool of yourselves here? Drag them out and punish them with 300 sticks. Drag them out and punish them with 300, no 500 sticks." A group of beast warriors of Scouting Office rushed into the courtyard like a pack of wolves and tigers. They grabbed these spies who fell down from the trees and dragged them out of the courtyard. Very soon, muffled noises of heavy sticks hitting on flesh could be heard coming from outside the courtyard. Those spies who fell down from the trees, because of the seductive technique, let out miserable cries. But very soon, their cries disappeared without a trace. In just a few words, dozens of spies had been beaten to death. Lying in Qin Qingshui's arms, Princess Yingchuan kept praising Qin Qingshui's manly spirit and heroic character with a sweet voice. Meanwhile, Wuqi kept shaking his head while lying on top of a tree. Under such an order, how did Qin Qingshui, the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard, manage to hold his position so firmly? If not for the fact that he was the lineal descendant of Qin Wuyang, perhaps he would have long been kicked out of his position, and his life might even be in danger. No matter how Qin Qingshui managed his subordinates, after listening to the secret discussion between him, Princess Yingchuan, and Taba Ao, Wuqi could roughly guess the role Qin Qingshui was playing in this matter. Taba Ao was bent on fighting for the title of Duke Yanle, but Lu Qingfeng was the first one who came to Ji City. Therefore, Taba Ao came to Qin Qingshui, asking him to help him kill Lu Qingfeng, so that Taba Muxiang could be promoted to the position of Duke Yanle. That was the reason why Taba Qingye lured and killed Lu Qingfeng. And Qin Qingshui chose to help Taba Qingye by arresting Lu Qingfeng on the spot. After Lu Qingfeng had successfully inherited the title of Duke, Yan Dan began to pay attention to the case of Yan Buji's murder. In order to clear his name, Taba Ao hastily killed Taba Muxiang as a sign to Lu Qingfeng. At the same time, without any sense of loyalty, he asked Qin Qingshui to clean up all the loose ends himself. At the same time, Princess Ying Chuan came to Qin Qingshui. Supposedly, both of them were old lovers. As Lu Qingfeng had inherited the title of Zhuguozheng and Duke Yanlu, Tai Yuewu's mother's family had begun to sharpen their blades in the Lu Kingdom, planning to strike the monarch of the Lu Kingdom. In order to save herself, Princess Ying Chuan had to deal with Lu Qingfeng. But with her identity as the daughter of the monarch of a third-tier vassal kingdom, how could she deal with Lu Qingfeng, the Duke of Yanlu? Helpless, Princess Ying Chuan could only beg Qin Qingshui to frame Lu Qingfeng. However, with Yan Dan personally paying attention to the case of Yan Buji's assassination, even if Qin Qingshui had 100 guts, he would not dare to frame someone recklessly. Princess Ying Chuan kept acting coquettishly in Qin Qingshui's arms, begging and using all kinds of flirtatious methods, hoping that Qin Qingshui would agree to help her deal with Lu Qingfeng. Even if she could not kill him, she could at least get Lu Qingfeng to promise her that Tai clan would not go too far in the Lu Kingdom. After acting coquettishly for a while, Princess Ying Chuan finally told him her bottom-line condition. If Tai clan could behave themselves and not try to usurp the monarch's position, the monarch of the Lu Kingdom would even be willing to cede half of the kingdom to Tai clan, allowing them to establish their own kingdom. Qin Qingshui just gave Princess Ying Chuan a vague answer with the name of Yan Dan. For the whole morning, both of them had made love on the bed for a few times, naked. Qin Qingshui had taken all the advantage, and Princess Ying Chuan had tried her best, yet she still couldn't win a single promise from Qin Qingshui. Qin Qingshui had vented his desire on Princess Ying Chuan for a total of 7 to 8 times, and at last, he did not even have the strength to lift his finger. Only then did he put his arms around Princess Ying Chuan, laughed and gave her an idea. All right, I'm being watched by His Majesty. Scouting office can't cover the sky with one hand in Great Yan Dynasty, as Gao Jianli, the Prime Minister, still has a secret spy office that has the right to supervise scouting office. Qin Qingshui breathed out a sigh, kissed Princess Ying Chuan's cheek, and said with a low voice, with the swallow keeping an eye on him, I can't simply frame Lu Qingfeng and convict him. If you want to protect the Lu Kingdom, just do as I say. First, go find the patriarch of Imperial Clan, Duke Yanxing, Yuxian, and then. Qin Qingshui moved his mouth close to Princess Ying Chuan's ear, using the technique of divine sense, and gave her a secret instruction. Princess Ying Chuan's body turned stiff, and her face turned extremely unsightly. However, Qin Qingshui didn't bother to consider what Princess Ying Chuan was thinking. After taking a few more liberties with her, he put on his clothes with the help of 2 young girls, then left without paying any attention to Princess Ying Chuan. All the spies in the mansion followed him out of the courtyard. Even the corpses of the dozen or so spies who had been killed were cleaned up. Princess Ying Chuan lay on the bed and stared blankly for a while. Suddenly, she let out an evil laugh and began cursing under her breath. Qin Qingshui, Ying Chuan is going to wipe out your entire clan. Chapter 117. The coach of Princess Ying Chuan left the courtyard. After all, she was the princess of the Lu Kingdom. Naturally, she could not be compared with the monarch of a great kingdom like Taba Ao. Princess Ying Chuan's coach was kept in a very low profile. It was just an ordinary double-wheeled coach, painted with a lacquer. 4 guards were stationed beside the coach, and apart from Princess Ying Chuan, there were only 2 serving ladies in the coach. A coach like this looked rather shabby in G City, extremely inconspicuous. After leaving the mansion, the coach took a few rounds around the inner second city of G City. After passing through a few streets and alleys, the coach went through the main road and exited the city gate. It took another round around the 3 inner cities, and finally came to the inner first city through a city gate on the east. Along the way, Wuxia, who had been following behind the coach, could not help but shake his head. Compared to Taba Ao, Princess Ying Chuan's experience was far behind. In order to get rid of the spies, she had purposely taken so many detours along the way, and tried her best to travel along those deserted streets. However, when such a shabby coach was roaming around in the inner city, it would actually attract more attention. Wuxia did not pay much attention to the chariots, But when Princess Yingchuan's chariot went straight into the inner city, which was the inner city that was right next to the imperial city, Wuxia was taken aback by what he saw. Those who lived in the inner city were the core members of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan, such as the 8 princes, or the members of imperial clan who had a higher seniority than the 8 princes. Could it be that Princess Yingchuan had some kind of relationship with these core members of imperial clan? The coach traveled along the Green Swallow Avenue in the inner city for a few miles from east to west, then turned into a side street called Green Cloud Alley. Princess Yingchuan's coach came to a halt. It was extremely difficult to follow Princess Yingchuan in the inner city. Not to mention the city guards along the way, there were dozens of sky patrolling eagle guards flying in the sky, constantly monitoring any movement on the ground. Many personal guards of Imperial clan in the inner city were also coming and going from time to time. Even if there was an unfamiliar person on the street, it would be questioned by these people. Eventually, Wuxia was forced to exercise the escape art of Earth and follow behind Princess Yingchuan's coach. He also noticed that there was a small shield emblem on Princess Yingchuan's coach. The city guards along the way also saw this emblem, so they didn't stop her carriage. Otherwise, with her shabby carriage, how could she enter the inner city? The place where Princess Yingchuan's coach stopped was the side entrance of a mansion. It was at least 1.5 miles away from the south side entrance. The area of this mansion was extremely large, much larger than Yuxian's mansion. Wuxia hid underground. His divine sense penetrated the ground and swept a glance at a vertical board on the left side of the side door. The vertical board was only about a foot long and had 3 small golden characters engraved on it. Prince Ren's Mansion. The Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, was one of the 8 princes of Great Yan Dynasty. Like Yan Helua, he was also Yan Dan's great-grandson. However, Yan Xianchen was much older than Yan Helua. He was the most experienced one among the 8 princes of Great Yan Dynasty. He had been sitting on the throne of Prince Ren for 500 years, and his cultivation base had reached the realm of Jin Dan. He was the prince with the highest prestige among all the 8 princes. Although Imperial Grandmaster Yan Yuxian was 1 generation younger than Yan Dan's grandson, when it came to age, the Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, was the oldest among all the 8 princes. He had been working in Great Yan Dynasty for several hundred years. Apart from the crown prince, Yan Qijuan, who had always surpassed him, Yan Qijuan was basically the man with the greatest power in Great Yan Imperial Court. Apart from Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan, only when the other few princes of Great Yan Dynasty joined forces could they contend against Yan Xianchen. Among the 3 prime ministers and 9 ministers of Great Yan Dynasty, apart from the Prime Minister Gao Jianli, who served Yan Dan for a long time, the other 2 prime ministers, the Minister of Justice, and a few other important ministers of Great Yan Dynasty, were all disciples of Yan Xianchen. After several hundred years of entanglement of interests, the power held by Yan Xianchen, the Prince of Ren, was simply beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Wuxia unleashed his divine sense and scanned the 3 gold-plated characters of Prince Ren's mansion in a daze. He was right, this was Prince Ren's mansion. Princess Yingchuan and Yan Xianchen were friends? Or was she just in contact with someone in his mansion? Wuxia had no idea what Qin Qingshui had told Princess Yingchuan, asking her to look for the Duke of Yanxing, Yuxian. But to his surprise, she went straight for the Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen. This gave Wuxia a great shock. Since the person she was looking for was Yan Xianchen, why was she taking a stroll in the inner city just now? Was she playing a trick on him? The curtain of the coach fluttered, and Princess Yingchuan came out from it. She held her head high up, and with the help of 2 serving ladies, she walked straight into the side door of Prince Ren's mansion. An imperial eunuch clad in a red robe was already waiting in front of the door, together with a few young eunuchs who looked no older than 10 years old. Upon seeing Princess Yingchuan, this imperial eunuch, who obviously had a rather high status in Prince Ren's mansion, hastily bowed and greeted her with a smile on his face. Was there any commotion just now? Princess Yingchuan held her head high up and asked with an indifferent tone. A few ignorant men were following behind Princess, and now they have been used to fill up the moat. The imperial eunuch hastily replied. 5 of them are secret agents of Xian Kingdom, and 7 of them are from scouting office. Now, they have all sunk into the moat, and they won't give you any more troubles. Rest assured, princess, except for those who should know about this. Those who shouldn't know about this will never know that you're here." Princess Yingchuan nodded her head, smiled sweetly, stretched out her finger and gently pinched the chin of the imperial eunuch, then walked into the side door with a smile on her face. While Wuxia was about to follow Princess Yingchuan into Prince Ren's mansion, he was surprised to find that the imperial eunuch, who should have gotten rid of the root of troubles and had no feelings for women, was swallowing a few mouthfuls of saliva, staring greedily at Princess Yingchuan's swaying buttocks. With a strange smile on his face, he followed behind Princess Yingchuan. How could this be an imperial eunuch? Clearly, he was a burly man with a strong desire. Strange. Wuxia murmured under his breath, then hastily plunged into Prince Ren's mansion. As the most experienced prince of Great Yan Dynasty, the mansion of Prince Ren, Yan Xianchen, was heavily guarded. Both the ground and the sky were protected by layers upon layers of defensive mechanisms. Wuxia continued his journey underground. About 1,000 feet below the ground of Prince Ren's mansion, a defensive formation of 9 palaces grade was tightly wrapped up. On top of that, it was obvious that there was a master of formation guarding these formations. Streams of powerful ripples of energy were constantly circulating underground, constantly monitoring the activity underground. However, in Wuqi's opinion, the 3-layered 9 palaces defensive formation was a little too simple and crude. Although the master of formation who constructed these formations had the cultivation base of the later stage of Jin Dan realm, the master of formation guarding here should only have the cultivation base of the early stage of Jin Dan realm. Therefore, the formations could only unleash less than 30% of their full power, and there were quite a lot of flaws in the circulation of their energy. Wuxia had only extracted a great amount of earth element energies from the surrounding underground and wrapped them around his body. With that, he could easily penetrate through these 3 defensive formations. He even had the leisure to send his divine sense through the formations, peeping at the master of formation who was controlling these 3 formations. He was a human immortal of Jin Dan realm, who was guarding on top of a tall tower located in the heart of Prince Ren's mansion. The 9-storied tall tower was connected to a total of 9 defensive formations in Prince Ren's mansion. It was the core of the defensive mechanisms of Prince Ren's mansion. The dark-skinned human immortal was sitting on the lowest floor of the tall tower, performing incantation gestures with a serious expression, controlling the operation of the 9 formations. However, because of his cultivation base and the cultivation of the formations, he didn't notice that Wuxia had already entered Prince Ren's mansion. Sneering, Wuxia followed closely behind Princess Yingchuan and came to the back garden of Prince Ren's mansion. The back garden of Prince Ren's mansion was at least 3 times bigger than Lu Qingfeng's back garden. The garden was filled with luxuriant trees, and numerous abodes were hidden amidst the grasses and flowers. It was a very secretive place. With great familiarity, Princess Yingchuan walked along a path paved with golden shells, and finally came to an abode surrounded by a stream. The abode was built entirely with pink, translucent strange stones, which made it look exquisite and luxurious, yet gave off a charming aura. Carefully, Wuxia squeezed his way into the abode, and came out from an artificial hill that was filled with holes of various sizes. Coincidentally, there was a cave in the artificial hill that could fit Wuxia, and it was densely filled with countless fist-sized holes. Through these holes, Wuxia could see everything that happened in the abode. Peering through one of the holes, Wuxia couldn't help but gasp. Right in front of the abode was a courtyard paved with palm-sized red jade blocks. A naked man, who stood over 8 feet tall, his skin as white as snow, his body strong and muscular, and his face handsome but filled with an evil aura, was wearing a special wheel made of pure gold, about 3 feet in diameter on his lower body. Complacently, he was turning the wheel at high speed with both hands. The man's body stood straight up, and without even asking, one could tell that the wheel made of pure gold was extremely heavy. The wheel was spinning at a very fast speed, producing swooshing noises from time to time. Sparks kept bursting out from the friction between his body and the wheel. However, his body was not harmed at all. Instead, the wheel made of pure gold had some scratches left on it. A group of beautiful girls, whose every movement was filled with an enchanting aura, had surrounded the courtyard. Their eyes were fixed on the man's erect lower body, clapping their hands and shouting, "Sect leader, you are so awesome! Sect leader is getting more and more powerful." Wuqi's teeth were chattering when he saw this. Subconsciously, he touched his private parts, grinned and shook his head. Using a wheel made of pure gold to wrap around that treasure, and spin it at such a high speed? How could this be described as powerful? This was simply an extraordinary talent, a freak among freaks. All of a sudden, the historical records of someone from Lu Xiaobai's memory rushed into Wu Qi's mind. Shi Huang grew strong, and the Empress Dowager continued to be lascivious. Lu Buwei feared that he would be implicated, so he asked the man of the great Yin, Lao Ai, to be his lover. Sometimes he played music and asked Lao Ai to travel on the Tong Wheel of the Yin Pass. When the Empress Dowager heard about it, she used it to trick her. When the Empress Dowager heard about it, she wanted to get it for herself. Lu Buwei entered Lao Ai and swindled people to accuse him of corruption. In history, apart from the famous fake eunuch Lao Ai, who else could accomplish such a feat? Lao Ai must be him. When he was still immortal, he could already play with a wheel made of paulownia wood. Now his cultivation base should be at the same level as Yan Dan, Jing Ke, and the others. Naturally, his innate ability was even more powerful. The wheel made of paulownia wood was not heavy enough, so it was only right that he used a wheel made of pure gold to show off his ability. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and carefully looked at Lao Ai from top to bottom with the corner of his eye. For some unknown reason, when he saw this fellow, Wu Qi felt like he was looking at a cobra that was spitting venom. Instinctively, he felt threatened. At this moment, Princess Yingchuan came into the courtyard. Upon entering, she dropped to her knees and bowed to Lao Ai with a smile on her face. "Your servant Yingchuan offers greetings to the sect leader of Great Sun, Old Immortal Lao Ai." Princess Yingchuan's voice was soft and languid, filled with a seductive charm. Chapter 118. Right when Princess Yingchuan stepped into the courtyard, Lao Ai, who had a muscular body like that of a fiend, immediately removed the golden wheel from his lower body while laughing out loud, then grabbed Princess Yingchuan and brought her to his side. Very quickly, Lao Ai took off Princess Yingchuan's clothes, then held the petite and beautiful Princess Yingchuan in his arms as if he was carrying a baby. With a jerk of his body, he plunged deep into Princess Yingchuan's body. "Yingchuan, you little bitch. I haven't seen you for a few years, but your cultivation base has improved greatly." In about 15 minutes, Lao Ai had completely absorbed the enormous energy essence from Princess Yingchuan's body. After purifying and refining all of them, he gave 1% of them to Princess Yingchuan, while the rest of them were transformed into energies and turned into his own cultivation base. However, after Princess Yingchuan absorbed this 1% of energies, her cultivation base had actually improved from the respiration tier of Xiantian realm to the body-strengthening tier. Princess Yingchuan pressed her body tightly against Lao Ai's chest, giggled softly and said, "Sect Master, Old Immortal, it has been 5 years since Yingchuan last saw you. During the past 5 years, Yingchuan has enjoyed himself with 43 Xiantian warriors and 1,759 peak stage Hotian warriors. He, the cultivation technique taught by Old Immortal is really incredible. Yingchuan has plucked the innate yang energy from those people, and they still have no idea about it." A strange, four-colored gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. He could clearly see a heterogeneous yet powerful energy essence bursting out from Princess Yingchuan's lower abdomen, flowing into his body through Lao Ai's penis. Lao Ai's long hair stood up one after another, with countless wisps of white mist rising up from them. His muscles began to swell, turning from a streamlined and smooth muscles into sharp and angular muscles that looked like they were cut by an axe. "Yes," said Princess Yingchuan in a deep voice. "Qin Qingshui wants Yingchuan to find the Duke of Yanxing, Yuxian and Suzhua Guozheng, Duke of Yanlu, for being a traitor and unfilial. His father was assassinated, and instead of avenging his father, he had colluded with his mother's clan to seize the foundation of Great Yan Dynasty." After pondering for a brief moment, Lao Ai waved his hand and drove away the few beautiful girls. He sat down on the jade bed, smiled at Princess Ing Chuan and said, "Fortunately, you came to find me. If not, Yin Chengfeng would be in great trouble, and you, Ing Chuan, would be dead for sure." "Hey, Qin Qing Shui, this descendant of Qin Wuyang is quite ruthless. It's a pity that he's still young and anxious when something happens. How could he do such a thing?" Laughing coldly, Lao Ai closed his eyes and pondered for a while. Suddenly he waved his hand at Princess Ing Chuan and said, "Come, I'll tell you something. Later on you'll go find Yin Chengfeng and make a deal with him. Ask your father to give the Tai clan a few prefectures in the Lu kingdom, and let them form their own kingdom. They are not allowed to have any designs on your family. The condition is..." Lao Ai sneered and said, "Ever since Yu Xian became the imperial grandmaster of Great Yin Dynasty, I've been keeping my eyes and ears around him. Over the years he had gotten to know him quite well. This fellow is greedy, lustful, and pretentious. But there is one good thing about him. When he accepts someone's money, he will definitely help them get things done. Yin Chengfeng bribed him with a county, asking him to help him with the matter of inheriting the title of Duke Yanlu. Yu Xian is a man who never hesitates when he accepts money. Now that he has accepted a county, the title of Duke will be secured for Yin Chengfeng. Judging from Lao Ai's performance, he should have formed his nascent soul. However, until now, he still hadn't discovered that Wu Qi had sneaked into his courtyard. Clearly, his cultivation base in soul and nascent divinity was just ordinary. No matter how powerful his energy was, no matter how strong his nascent soul was, a cultivator with a weak nascent divinity would eventually be like a pillar in the wall, and his achievement would always be limited. Wu Qi felt his scalp go numb. No wonder Lady Ruyang cursed Princess Ing Chuan as a slut who could sleep with any man. In just a short span of 5 years, 43 Xiantian experts and 1,759 peak-stage Hotian experts had become Princess Ing Chuan's personal guests. The frequency of this was really astonishing. No wonder the tiny bit of energy Lao Ai fed back to her after he purified it was able to raise her cultivation base by 2 realms. Lao Ai enjoyed the remaining enormous amount of energy all by himself. Perhaps, this energy was equal to at least 100 years of laborious cultivation of a Jindan realm cultivator. In just a few seconds, Princess Ing Chuan's fair and tender skin had turned pink, and pinkish sweat kept dripping down from her body, forming a small puddle on the ground. Both of her hands were gripping tightly onto Lao Ai's arms, while her nails were desperately scratching on Lao Ai's skin. But Lao Ai's smooth skin was 100 times stronger and more flexible than raw cowhide. Princess Ing Chuan's long and scarlet nails had broken a few of them on his skin, but not even a scratch was left on his skin. Inside the artificial hill, Wu Qi, who had curled up into a meatball, had his eyes filled with a myriad of colors. What he saw made his divine soul tremble, and he had no idea where he was. Upon hearing what Princess Ing Chuan said, Wu Qi smacked his lips. There were supreme-grade energy stones in the national treasury of the Lu Kingdom, and Great Yin Dynasty even built a minor universal teleportation formation in the Lu Kingdom. It was a blunder indeed. If he had known this earlier, he would have paid a visit to the Lu Kingdom's royal palace before he left the Lu Kingdom. Perhaps what Yandan, Jingku, and all the other men had attained through over 2,000 years of laborious cultivation could not be compared to Lao Ai, this peerless evil man. However, the cultivation base obtained from this evil cultivation technique was, after all, not a stable foundation. Wu Qi thought to himself, no matter how strong Lao Ai's cultivation base was, there was no need for him to be afraid of him. All the cultivators who cultivated to Jindan realm and nascent soul realm, by plucking cultivation techniques, were just like castles on the beach. Their foundation was too weak, and they were not worth paying too much attention to. Princess Ing Chuan's face turned extremely unsightly. The title of Duke Yanlu has become vacant once again. No matter who was the one who assassinated Yan Buji, and no matter who was the one behind all these, there will always be some clues. He has set up an inescapable net in advance, and once the mastermind makes a move, he will be able to capture the mastermind in one fell swoop. He has made a great contribution. But Ing Chuan was assassinated by him, and Yin Chengfeng was unlucky enough to be removed from the title of Duke Yanlu of Zhuguozheng. Forcing a few tears out of her eyes, Princess Ing Chuan said with a sweet voice, "Old immortal, I, Ing Chuan, have emptied all the supreme-grade energy stones in the Lu Kingdom's national treasury, activated the minor universal teleportation formation that great Yan dynasty had constructed in the Lu Kingdom, and came to Ji City in a hurry." Princess Ing Chuan knelt on the ground, holding Lao Ai's thigh with both hands, and gently rubbing her chin against the sensitive part of Lao Ai's thigh. She looked at Lao Ai with a pitiful expression and said with a sweet voice, "Old immortal, it's not that Ing Chuan doesn't want to listen to you, but if I didn't come here to ask for help, I'm afraid I would be homeless in the future." Not allowing Princess Ing Chuan to say anything, Lao Ai said with a cold voice, "If you report this to Chief Yuxian, you will be dead for sure." Lao Ai looked at Princess Ing Chuan lazily and said in an indifferent tone, "What am I doing? I need to protect myself." Yan Dan scolded him during the palace banquet, and gave him 3 months to investigate the case of Yan Buji's assassination. How is he going to investigate this case? He has no clue at all, so how is he going to investigate this case? He used you to oust Yan Chengfeng from the position of Duke Yanlu. Doesn't that mean the position of Duke Yanlu is vacant? Lao Ai let out a strange laugh, shook his head and said, "If you report this to Yan Chengfeng, Yuxian will only ask someone to drive you out of the imperial family palace with a big stick, and he will never listen to your nonsense. However, once you step out from the imperial family palace, Qin Qingshui will definitely send someone to kill you, and the news that Duke Yanlu, Yan Chengfeng, hired a killer to kill you will spread across Ji City in less than the time it takes to finish a meal. Zhuo Guozheng of Great Yan Dynasty is plotting to seize the throne of a vassal state, and he has sent someone to assassinate Princess Ing Chuan, who is the one who reported this case. This is more than enough to send him to eternal damnation." At last, Princess Ing Chuan's body suddenly tensed up, and all her muscles began to tremble violently. Strange gurgling noises kept coming out from her throat. She leaned her body backward forcefully, and her eyes slowly rolled up. Her body was twitching like a frog that was skinned and electrocuted. It was a very bizarre sight. Princess Ing Chuan listened attentively to Lao Ai's instruction, while Wu Qi's eyes were flickering, as he memorized every single word Lao Ai said in his mind. Lao Ai shook his head, breathed out a long sigh and said, "I've always looked down on Qin Wuyang. Not only is he unable to achieve anything, the descendants he raises are getting worse and worse. Although Qin Qingshui's scheme is extremely vicious, but after all he is still too young. How could the mastermind show himself so easily?" Lao Ai panted lightly, then slowly placed Princess Ing Chuan on the ground. He straightened his back and asked in an indifferent tone, "Ing Chuan, why didn't you stay in the Lu Kingdom? Why did you come to Ji City? I remember I told you that you will only come back to Ji City once every 10 years, and offer me what you have harvested. Why did you come back so early this time?" Lao Ai stared at Princess Ing Chuan with surprise. Frowning, he casually pressed his hand to the side, and a jade bed appeared out of nowhere. Lao Ai lay down on the jade bed, then called over a few beautiful girls who stood under the eaves of the abode, asking them to climb onto the bed and have some fun with him. At the same time, he turned to Princess Ing Chuan and said, "Tell me everything in detail." Princess Ing Chuan dared not to be negligent. Without hesitation, she quickly told her that Lu Qingfeng was the illegitimate son of Yan Buji, who had now inherited the throne of Zhuo Guozheng and Duke Yanlu. She also told her that his mother's clan, Lady Ruyang, was from the Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang of the Lu Kingdom. She also told her that the Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang of the Lu Kingdom, where his mother's clan, Lady Ruyang, came from. She also told her that the Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang of the Lu Kingdom, was now preparing for a rebellion to seize the foundation of the Lu Kingdom. Then she told him the reason why she went to her old lover, Qin Qingshui, and asked for advice after arriving at Ji City. Stealthily, he opened his eyelids and peeked at Lao Ai and Princess Ing Chuan from the corner of his eyes. Suddenly, Wu Qi swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He had to admit that the current posture of both of them was very captivating. Lao Ai's sturdy body and Princess Ing Chuan's gentle and charming body were like the two extremes of yin and yang. Although they were emanating an extremely evil aura, They were giving off a boundless temptation. If not for the divine flame of order protecting Wuxi's soul and stabilizing his mind in his spiritual ocean, and if he were any other cultivator, the fiend would have long grown inside his body, and the Yin flame would have invaded his body, burning his Tao foundation into ashes. When Lao Ai entered Princess Ying Chuan's body, Wuxi had his scalp go numb when he saw the ridiculously sturdy body of Princess Ying Chuan and the petite body of Princess Ying Chuan. Wuxi had no idea how Princess Ying Chuan was able to endure such a frightening and huge creature, but judging from her moans, he could tell that she was experiencing a great thrill and a boundless pleasure. Lao Ai had only moved his body slightly, but Princess Ying Chuan immediately began to struggle and jump crazily like a fish that was scooped up from the shore. Apart from Princess Ying Chuan, there were nearly 100 enchanting beauties in the courtyard. The aura emanated from their bodies was exactly the same as Princess Ying Chuan's. If these beauties were the same as Princess Ying Chuan, the bees that Lao Ai released to pluck his energy, how amazing would Lao Ai's cultivation base be with this method? Hey. Lao Ai exhaled a long and rough breath. A strange pinkish flame burst out from the vicinity of his dantian, within which a wisp of red sun could be vaguely seen. The flame was calcining and purifying the impure energies that came gushing out from Princess Ying Chuan's body bit by bit, eventually turning them into extremely pure energies, and being absorbed by the wisp of red sun. The impure and impure parts of the energies were quickly turned into white mist, and sprayed out from Lao Ai's hair. Princess Ying Chuan's body trembled, and she cried out with a shrill voice. Qin Qingshui is a son of a bitch. Why did he do this to Ying Chuan? Chapter 119. Wu Qi shrunk his body, and the dense earth elemental energies in the surrounding began to gather towards him, gradually wrapping him up. Inch by inch, his body sank into the ground, and he was about to leave Prince Ren's mansion. Right at this moment, a knock was heard from the entrance of the courtyard where the abode was located. An old man with a ruddy complexion and a big beard, who had a dignified appearance and a majestic bearing, walked slowly into the courtyard. The old man was clad in a dark green long robe, embroidered with a few green swallows spreading their wings. Obviously, it was the imperial robe of a king of Great Yin dynasty. Upon seeing the naked Lao Ai and Princess Ying Chuan, the old man's expression remained unchanged. He bowed at Lao Ai without looking sideways and said, "Master, your disciple has something that I need to discuss with you." Wu Qi, who had more than half of his body sunk into the ground, had a solemn expression on his face. He nodded his head lightly, then quickly fled with the fastest speed possible. The Prince of Ren, Yin Xianchen, was actually Lao Ai's disciple? If this news were to be spread out, perhaps Yen Dan would immediately come here with a sword in his hand. But why did he give this news to Yen Dan for free? Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and continued traveling at high speed underground. Along the way, he kept thinking about what Lao Ai had told Princess Ying Chuan. Suddenly he let out a cold laugh. Sure enough, this Lao Ai was a man who wished to see the world plunged into chaos. Perhaps he had been restraining himself for over 2,000 years, and now, he had the intention to stir up a storm? Come to think of it, it was about time for him to come out and stir up a storm. Yin Xianchen was his disciple. That also meant a large number of ministers of Great Yin dynasty and countless vassal kingdoms had actually become Lao Ai's forces. For a peerless evil man like him to hide in Great Yin dynasty for over 2,000 years, it was definitely not for the good weather and happiness of Great Yin dynasty. Interesting, this is really interesting. I really want to see what kind of expression will Yen Dan have when he finds out that Lao Ai is hiding in Ji City. Wu Qi laughed in a strange voice, then shook his head and said, No, unless I gather the innate qi of the 5 elements and form the 5 elements Jin Dan. Only then will I be qualified to fish in this muddy water. What I have now is far from enough. Before figuring out the ins and outs of the Great Sun sect, before figuring out the origins of this world, rashly intervening in the affairs of this place, even if they could gain a little advantage at the beginning, if they were not careful, their souls would scatter and scatter. No matter how magical the scroll of stealing was, Wu Qi was just a little cultivator at the early stage of Jin Dan realm, and he had only inherited the water element Jin Dan. He had not even found any innate gold element spirit item yet. So what made him take the initiative to provoke all these troubles? Loki. No matter I am the inheritor of Scroll of Stealing, or the sect leader's disciple of underhand sect. I travel 1,000 miles just for the sake of wealth. What does the fate of great Yin dynasty have to do with me? Wuxia kept reminding himself of his duty. He escaped from Prince Ren's mansion through the earth escape art, found a secluded and deserted alley, and came up to the surface. Using his divine sense, Wuxia carefully peered into the sky. The sky patrolling Eagle Guards of Scouting Office were wheeling in the sky not far away, and he didn't see any sky patrolling Eagle Guards in this area. Hastily, he changed into the official uniform of Kingdom Supervisor from Zhuguozheng's mansion. Strode towards the Duke of Zhuguozheng's mansion, which was situated on the west side of the Imperial Palace. Although Zhuguozheng's mansion could not meddle in the affairs of Great Yin Dynasty, for the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west, it was a government office that stood above their heads. Therefore, in Ji City, when Wuxia, who was clad in the official uniform of Kingdom Supervisor, walked on the street, he attracted a lot of attention. Along the way, Wuxia came to Zhuguozheng's mansion as if nothing had happened. After showing his identity medallion to the soldier on duty at the entrance, he went straight into the mansion. In just a short while, Wuxia was followed by a few secret agents from Scouting Office. As the #1 confidant of Duke Yanlu, Wuxia didn't follow Lu Chengfeng to Zhuguozheng's mansion to work. Instead, he vanished into thin air for a period of time. For some people with an ulterior motive, this was enough to make a great article. Especially when none of the guards at the few city gates of the inner city found out how Wuxia entered the city. The mystery behind this incident was even more worthy to be studied by those with an ulterior motive. Standing at the entrance of Zhuguozheng's mansion, Wuxia turned his head and gave a few glances at those secret agents who had been following him for a while. He let out a few strange laughs. The faces of those secret agents fell instantly, and they spun and left hastily. Wuxia didn't want to go too far. He just wanted to scare them away, and only then did he swagger into Zhuguozheng's mansion. Immediately, he heard a sonorous roar coming from the entrance. This gold mine was first discovered by the Gaoling Kingdom. The Zhonglang River is also the water system of the Gaoling Kingdom. What right does the Lishan Kingdom have to share the profits from it? The voice sounded like the clashing of metals, sharp and jarring to the ears. It shook the entire hall of Zhuguozheng's mansion, and made the dust kept falling from the roof beams. Zhuguozheng's mansion was the most traditional yamen of Great Yin Dynasty. There was a big door right in front of it, and behind the screen wall was a spacious square. On both sides of the square were 2 rows of offices, where all the officials under Wuqi's command handled their official duties. At the far end of the square was a hall where the chief officials handled their official duties, and the sonorous voice just now was heard coming from this hall. Striding across the 300 feet wide and 1,000 feet long square, Wuxia saw the officials under Zhuguozheng sneakily poking their heads out from the offices on both sides, peeking into the direction of the hall. Wuxia snorted coldly, and his voice brought with it a bone-piercing coldness that pierced right into the ears of these officials. Only then did these officials discover Wuqi's presence, and shrunk their heads back to their offices shyly, continuing with their own tasks. With a faint smile on his face, Wuxia walked into the hall, and saw Lu Chengfeng sitting behind a long table at the far end of the hall like a wooden statue. Both of his palms were locked into a lotus incantation gesture, placed before his dantian, and his eyes were drooping. He didn't pay any attention to the group of burly men who were fighting fiercely in the hall. Instead, he was exercising his cultivation and cultivating. Inside the hall, which measured about 300 feet in both width and length, Yin Bugui, Luo Kadi, Zhang Hu, and a few others were standing with their backs against the walls. Apart from Yin Bugui, who was keeping a vigilant watch on the 2 groups of men who were arguing fiercely in the hall, all the others had their minds drifting away. Perhaps Zhang, who was thinking about the new lover he met in a brothel in Ji City, as his saliva nearly dripped down from his mouth. Just like Lu Chengfeng, Luo Kadi and Ma Liang, 2 warriors of Xiantian realm, had their eyelids drooping and were quietly regulating their breaths. Inside the hall, a tall and burly man, clad in a pale yellow battle robe and a chain-link soft armor, was shouting loudly. Judging from his voice, he was the emissary from the Gao Ling kingdom. Standing next to him was a young man, clad in a dark green battle robe, and underneath it was a half-body armor of Qilin devouring heart. His right shoulder was bared, and his left arm guard was actually a lower-grade magical item. He was emanating a faintly discernible ripple of energy. He was pulling and pulling the emissary from the Gao Ling kingdom, arguing with him with a loud voice. Next to both of them were several dozens of attendants from the Gao Ling kingdom and the Lishan kingdom. They were greeting each other's mothers, and he was greeting each other's ancestors. They were pulling and tangling each other like prostitutes soliciting customers on the street. If not because they were in the hall of Great Yan Dynasty's Swordsmanship mansion, perhaps these attendants, who had the cultivation base of at least 40 to 50 years, would have long fought each other. Stealthily, Wuxia walked into the hall, sticking close to the wall on the right, and bypassing the group of nearly crazy emissaries. Stealthily, he came next to Lu Chengfeng, lowered his voice and asked, "Isn't it just a gold mine? Why are they making such a ruckus?" The overall strength of the Gao Ling kingdom and the Lishan kingdom is stronger than the Lu kingdom. One gold mine less or one gold mine more won't decide the fate of the two kingdoms. Why are they doing this? Lu Chengfeng opened his eyes. Soundlessly, 2 6-feet-long streams of white mist sprayed out from his nostrils. When he saw Wuxia, a smile bloomed on his face, then he lightly knocked on a scroll placed on the table with his finger and said, "It is fine if it is just a gold mine. This is the information sent by the West Wind Guards of Scouting Office just now. The gold mine that has the reserves of approximately 80 million gold coins is just an associated mineral vein. Underneath the gold mine is a purple gold mine that stretches for 30 miles. Both kingdoms have excavated purple gold marrow of excellent quality from this mine. Beneath the purple gold mine is an extremely high-quality metal-attributed spirit stone mine. Right now, the spies of the two countries and the West Wind Guard stationed in the two countries have yet to survey the range and quality of the metal-attributed spirit stone mine." With a flick of his sleeve, Lu Chengfeng shook out a white and dazzling energy stone, about the size of a soybean. He said indifferently, "This is an energy stone sample found by the secret agents of West Wind Guards after they robbed and killed a mine master from the Gao Ling kingdom. It is an upper-tier gold element energy stone of excellent quality, and it has a pure and single element. In the entire Great Yan dynasty, there are only 7 gold element energy stone mines of such quality." Grabbing the tiny gold element energy stone, Wuxia sensed the extremely pure and sharp gold element energy contained within it. Then he nodded his head. Among all the energy stone mines, the most common ones with the lowest value were the earth element energy stones, or those mixed with earth element energy stones of other elements. The energy stone mines were hidden deep under the ground. As the earth was of earth element, therefore, the earth element energy stones were the most common ones, and they were also mixed with fire and water element energy stones. In the vicinity of volcanoes or lakes, one could often find fire and water element energy stones. Therefore, apart from the earth element energy stones, the value of these two types of energy stones was slightly higher, and they were also relatively common. The rarest of them were the pure wood and gold element energy stones. Metal element energy stones were only found in huge metal mines, and it was extremely difficult to mine them, and it was extremely difficult to form them. As for wood element energy stones, unless they were found in a spirit land that was formed by the natural wood element energy, it was impossible for them to form naturally. Generally speaking, the value of metal element energy stones was ranked second among all the energy stones. Especially the pure gold element energy stones, which did not contain any impurities. Not only could it help in cultivation, it was also an indispensable supporting material for crafting all kinds of divine weapons. In addition to that, all kinds of powerful killing formations required pure gold element energy stones as the energy core, or else they would never be able to unleash the incomparably sharp killing force of gold element energy. Princess Yingchuan is going to come and request an audience with young master. Young master, you just need to agree to her condition, allowing Tai clan to separate from the Lu kingdom and form their own kingdom. But young master, you need Princess Yingchuan to promise you that the army of the Lu kingdom will cooperate with the army of Tai clan to attack the Gao Ling kingdom, and also cooperate with the Lishan kingdom to attack the Gaoling kingdom. Wu Qi sneered and said, "The Gaoling kingdom is the mortal enemy of the Lu kingdom. They will never reject young master's condition." Lu Chengfeng asked in a low voice, "Join hands with the Lishan kingdom? Fine, what about that mineral vein?" Wu Qi said in a low voice, "I'll go talk to the emissary of the Lishan kingdom. The army of the Lu kingdom will cooperate with the Lishan kingdom to attack the Gaoling kingdom. And after seizing that mineral vein, Tai clan will monopolize 70% of the production, which will be the foundation of their new kingdom. If they don't agree, we'll join hands with the Gaoling kingdom immediately. In short, we'll take over 70% of the mineral vein. Also, all the energy stones mined by the Lishan kingdom will be purchased by us at the market price." After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi continued, "When discussing with Princess Ying Chuan, young master, try to take as much advantage of her as you can. Little Meng City of the Three Mountains province must be in our hands. We don't care how much land the Lu kingdom gives to Tai clan, but Little Meng City of the Three Mountains province will be our private property." Without any hesitation, Lu Qingfeng agreed to Wu Qi's suggestion. Chapter 120. Before Princess Ying Chuan arrived, Wu Qi had a quick discussion with Lu Qingfeng. After that, Lu Qingfeng grabbed a paperweight made from 1,000 years old ebony wood and forcefully slapped it on the table. At this moment, Lu Qingfeng exercised his cultivation and injected a great amount of innate energy into the paperweight. It produced a loud boom that sounded like the roar of thunder and shook the entire hall. The emissaries of Gaoling Kingdom and Lishan Kingdom were struck dumb. Chi-Chi tidied up his armor, kneeled down and bowed respectfully to Lu Qingfeng and said, "Your Excellency Guozheng, forgive us for our rudeness." Lu Qingfeng snorted coldly, gave both of them a fierce glare, and cried out in a low voice, "What is this place? Is this a place where you can make a ruckus? Somebody, please bring both of them to the side hall and calm down. Come back after you've figured out the solution to this matter. You must remember that this is Ji City, the capital of Great Yan Dynasty. This is a place where there are rules and laws. You are not allowed to mess around and humiliate Great Yan Dynasty." Luo Kadi and all the guards swarmed forward and separated the emissaries and attendants of both kingdoms, half forcing them to the side hall on the left and right side of the hall. After that, they closed the door. A large group of guards surrounded the two side halls, guarding them so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. Lu Qingfeng gave Wu Qi a look, then rose and walked towards the side hall where the emissaries of Lishan Kingdom were staying. Before Princess Ying Chuan could come here and bring out the conditions that Wu Qi already knew, Lu Qingfeng had to convince the emissaries of Lishan Kingdom first. Meanwhile, Wu Qi called out to Zhao Qinzue, Meng Xiaobai, and a few other men, then left Guozheng mansion hastily. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Wu Qi was delighted to see Princess Zhongli's exceedingly luxurious carriage speeding towards him. 8 ghost immortals, whose bodies were shrouded in a towering Yin energy, were following close to the carriage with ferocious looks in their eyes. A dozen palace guards were riding on their mounts, trailing far behind, not daring to come too close. Seeing Wu Qi coming out from Guozheng's mansion, Princess Zhongli happily lifted the curtain, revealing half of her smiling face. "How did you know that Zidan was coming, and specially went out to welcome me? That's not right. Where are you going with them?" Quickly walking down the steps, Wu Qi approached Princess Zhongli's carriage and said with a smile, "I'm going to do something fun. I was just fretting that I don't have anyone to use, Zidan. Why don't I borrow these 8 seniors by your side?" Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes. With lightning speed, she stretched her hand out from the carriage window and grabbed onto Wu Qi's ear. Lowering her voice, she asked, "What do you want me to borrow them for? If there's anything fun to do, you must bring me along. If you want to hide from me and sneak away to have fun, I guarantee that no matter what you want to do, you won't be able to do it." Although Wu Qi's ear was grabbed, his smile became even more joyful. "All right, I've been waiting for you, Princess Zhongli, to say this. If you didn't take the initiative to bring it up." Wu Qi was prepared to go to the imperial palace to look for her and invite her to oversee it. With Princess Zhongli following him, No matter what outrageous things Wuxia did, the others would think that it was logical, right? Using the disguise of this unruly princess to do something, it was indeed an evil pleasure. Without explaining to Princess Zhonglu what he was going to do, Wuxia summoned those palace guards and asked them to find a coach used by ordinary wealthy merchants for Princess Zhonglu. After that, he asked the 8 ghost immortals to restrain their strong ghost aura, tie their loose hair into a bun, and put on some jewelry and accessories, trying their best to look like an obedient housewife. After giving the ghost immortals and the coach a glance, Wuxia turned to look at the luxurious yet bold long dress worn by Princess Zhonglu, which had a totally different style from the conservative and traditional palace dress of Great Yin Dynasty. Although this long dress had a strange style, all kinds of tiny symbols on it showed Princess Zhonglu's noble status. Therefore, he didn't want to alert her when he was going to do something later. Noticing the dilemma on Wuqi's face, Princess Zhonglu said cheerfully, "Don't worry about me, just lead the way. Baizhuer always has a lot of clothes on her, so I'll just change into another one later. By the way, what are you going to do? Why do you want them to dress like this?" Frowning, Princess Zhonglu looked at the 8 ghost immortals, who had changed their appearances into ordinary housewives. She was puzzled. Wuxia didn't explain, just pressed his hand on Princess Zhonglu's head and shoved her into the coach. Wuxia, who had also changed into a new outfit, sat on the coachman's seat, waved the long whip and gave a loud shout, then drove the coach towards the city gate. Princess Zhonglu grumbled discontentedly in the coach. Then, she heard the rustling of clothes, and began to change her clothes in the coach. At the same time, Wuxia also sensed that the strange ripple in the coach, which had disturbed the surrounding energies of 5 elements, was gradually disappearing. Wuxia nodded his head. Princess Zhonglu was indeed a clever girl, as she had retracted the 5 colored divine rays behind her back in advance. With the cultivation base of Princess Zhonglu and the 8 ghost immortals, if they exercised their cultivation with all their might, they could probably suppress the Jindan's strange sign on the surface of their bodies for about 6 hours. After that, they would no longer have the energy to suppress the ripple in their bodies. 6 hours was more than enough. They drove the coaches, bringing with them a large group of palace guards, secret agents of scouting office, and guards from Duke Yinli's mansion, who had their faces completely changed. They left the inner city and middle city in a mighty manner. Approximately 2 hours later, they arrived at the east side of the outer city, on the street that was very famous in Ji City, the mighty Martial Street. Great Yin Dynasty's martial arts was very popular. Even in a remote corner like Little Meng City of the Lu Kingdom, there were still over 100 to 200,000 warriors begging for food there. In the territory of Great Yin Dynasty, there were countless wandering swordsmen who roamed freely in the martial world. As the heart of Great Yin Dynasty, Ji City was naturally a blessed land with the highest concentration of elite warriors. Those who believed that they could make a name for themselves in Ji City, could take root in Ji City, or even achieve a meteoric rise in their career, would gather here from all over Great Yin Dynasty. And the mighty Martial Street was the place with the highest concentration of warriors in Ji City. This mighty Martial Street, which was 50 feet wide and 25 miles long, together with the 24 side streets and alleys on both sides, was home to all kinds of warrior clubs, martial clubs, dojos, swordsmen, archers, and many other warrior guilds. There were at least tens of thousands of them. Among them, the largest warrior clubs and dojos had over 10,000 warriors under their command, and many of them were peak stage warriors of Xiantian realm. The background of these martial clubs and guilds was very complicated. Perhaps, one of the martial clubs was funded and established by one of the important ministers of Great Yin Dynasty. To put it bluntly, these martial clubs and guilds were the private armies and guards kept by those top-notch nobles or super wealthy people of Great Yin Dynasty. Furthermore, they didn't need to occupy the legal quota of private armies, and they could always ask these warriors to do whatever they wanted to do, even if they were involved in some shady business. Even Scouting Office, a secret spy organization of Great Yin Dynasty, would occasionally recruit some young warriors from the martial clubs in mighty Martial Street, and after training them, they would be recruited as the lower-level subordinates of Scouting Office. Sometimes, when there was a high-risk operation, The scouting office or the criminal and justice office would directly recruit warriors here for their own use. Therefore, the mighty Marshall Street was definitely the place with the most complicated population in G City. Hundreds of thousands of warriors would gather in this place. Fights, assassinations in the middle of the night, murders on the street, and many other things happened all day long. This was the only place in G City where the law of the land didn't really work, and everything was decided purely by the law of the jungle. Those in power of Great Yin Dynasty had purposely loosened the management of the mighty Marshall Street and the few blocks around it. As long as these warriors didn't hurt the common people, no matter if they killed, burned, or did anything else in this area, no one would look into it. Warriors were fierce tigers and wild wolves. In order to maintain the bloodthirsty and wild nature of warriors, they had to follow the law of the jungle, and only then could they pick out the most outstanding talents. Therefore, the mighty Marshall Street had always been a place where no one dared to approach. Those who dared to enter the street were either rich men who had a lot of money in their pockets and were ready to hire someone to do something for them, or they were the nobles who held great power in their hands and could help some lucky warriors achieve a meteoric rise overnight, or they were the heroes of the pugilistic world, who thought they had great martial arts skills and could create a world for themselves in this place. When Wuxia was driving the coach and bringing a large group of guards to the mighty Marshall Street, right in front of the coach, two groups of warriors were fighting each other with blades in their hands. No one knew why they were fighting, but a few young and beautiful girls were screaming hoarsely at the side of the fighting ring. It could be assumed that these girls were the cause of the fight. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, 3 warriors had fallen to the ground, bathed in blood. Very quickly, they were dragged into an alley by a group of men clad in black clothes using iron hooks. Covered with blood stains, the victorious warriors were greeting those tall and burly warriors around them complacently. Laughing out loud, they hugged a few beautiful girls and walked into an inn on the side of the street. Wuxia looked at these men and shook his head disapprovingly. Meanwhile, Princess Zhongli stuck her head out curiously. Looking at the bloodstains and a few missing bloodstains on the ground, she said with a smile on her face, "Is there such a wonderful place in G City? By Zhuer, go back and give those few damn slaves a good beating. Why didn't they inform me about such a wonderful place? Did someone really get killed here just now? How many were killed? This blood is so red that it looks beautiful." Princess Zhonglu had changed into a conservative black long dress, yet she still looked very beautiful. A few burly men who were passing by the street saw Princess Zhonglu poking her head out from the window. They couldn't help but let out a sharp whistle and said, "Beauty, what are you doing in the mighty Marshall Street? Are you looking for someone to kill? Or are you looking for your gigolo? Although we brothers look ugly, we have strong muscles and bones, and we are the best partners on the bed." Princess Zhongli's face turned green, and the faint ripple of energy once again emanated from her face. Without changing his expression, Wuxia twisted his wrist and lashed out the horsewhip with a shrill whistle. The few burly men were badly beaten and bleeding, and were sent flying several hundred feet away, while howling miserably. Upon witnessing the mighty power of Wuxia's horsewhip, all the idlers lowered their heads and remained silent. The few burly men who were being beaten were experts of peak Hotian realm. The man who could defeat them with such ease must be a Daoist of Xiantian realm. A Daoist of Xiantian realm was merely a coachman for someone else. Needless to say, who would dare to talk nonsense to Princess Zhongli? Wasn't that the same as courting death? The coach passed through the crowd, traveled along the mighty Marshall Street for tens of miles, and finally stopped in front of a large-scale martial club. The front of this martial club was spacious and bright. It had 6 doors, and the 30-feet-tall green lacquer door was very eye-catching. A horizontal board, 6 feet tall and 30 feet wide, was hung above the door. For large golden characters were engraved on it with pure gold. "Subdue people with martial arts." Under the glittering and glinting board, a row of 18 burly men with their heads held high and chest puffed out were standing there in an awe-inspiring manner. "Hiss," Wuxia sneered, then crooked his finger at a few palace guards who had changed their clothes behind the coach and said, "Kick down the door, break both the arms and legs of the watchdogs and throw them inside. Tell their clubmaster, Shi Tianma, that our young miss has taken a fancy to their martial club, and we are here to challenge them." The few palace guards were struck dumb, while Princess Zhonglu was so happy that her eyebrows were raised. With a kick, the coach was smashed to pieces. Princess Zhonglu jumped down from the coach herself, leaped up the stairs, and kicked the door away. "Who is Shi Tianma? Get your young miss out here. We are here to challenge them." Chapter 121. Challenge the Martial Club? The group of burly men standing at the entrance of the Martial Club were struck dumb. Every year, a few new martial clubs would be opened in mighty Martial Street, and there would be more martial clubs being pushed aside by their peers, or being destroyed by some powerful martial artists. But how could such a thing happen to them? Shi Tianma, the martial club master of Shi Martial Club, had come to Ji City 90 years ago to open up a martial club and teach disciples. After 30 years of hard work, Shi Martial Club now had over 30,000 disciples. Among them, there were over 70 Xiantian warriors, and nearly 1,000 peak-stage Hotian warriors. There was also a rumor that, although Shi Tianma did not have the innate talent of cultivating spirit root, he had entered the Tao of martial arts, and had cultivated to the peak stage of embryonic breath realm of Xiantian realm. As long as he could tear apart the barrier of martial arts with his martial strength, he would be able to transform his chi and body with great perseverance and strength, stepping into the realm of human immortal from an ordinary warrior in Jin Dan. For the past 90 years, Shi Tianma had become a legend in the underworld of Ji City, an absolute grandmaster. Apart from the 30,000 apprentices who were still practicing martial arts in the martial club, countless apprentices had graduated from Shi Martial Club over the years. Some of these apprentices were the hanger-ons of influential clans, some were the generals in the army, and some were even the leaders of the sects in Ji City. In such a huge city like Ji City, as long as it was a business that could earn money, apart from those that were exclusively managed by the imperial family, Shi Martial Club could be found in all the other businesses. To be more specific, the power of Shi Martial Club alone was stronger than the combined strength of dozens of top-notch clans of the Lu Kingdom. No matter it was the absolute force or the influence in Great Yin Dynasty, even if all the forces of the Lu Kingdom were to be used, they would still be no match for Shi Tianma. Therefore, on the board hanging in front of Shi Martial Club, there was no sign of Shi Martial Club. Instead, there were 4 extremely arrogant characters, subduing others with martial arts. If explained in a positive way, it meant that Shi Tianma had a profound attainment in the Tao of martial arts, and was highly respected in martial arts. Therefore, he was able to subdue others with martial arts. If someone was not convinced, Shi Martial Club would use their fists to beat them until they were convinced. This was the so-called subduing others with martial arts. With such an overall strength and power, who would dare to challenge Shi Martial Club in front of their door? Princess Zhonglu kicked the door of the martial arts school into the courtyard. The strong men in front of the door were still in a daze. They stared at Princess Zhonglu blankly. Their limbs were stiff as if they were sleepwalking, and their eyes were fixed on her. They couldn't figure out what was going on for a long time. They didn't react, but Princess Zhonglu moved faster than anyone else. She laughed and rushed to the front of the 2 men, took out a handkerchief to pat her palm, and then gave each of them a heavy slap. A loud and clear popping noise startled Wuxia, who was standing right next to him, and made him shrink his neck. 2 burly men nimbly leaped up into the air, with wisps of blood spurting out from the corners of their mouths, and large front teeth spilling out from their mouths. Drawing a parabola in the air, they thudded heavily into the huge courtyard behind the main entrance of Shi Martial Club, which measured nearly 2 miles in both width and length. When the 2 doors of the martial arts school flew into the courtyard, the 1-foot-thick door made from golden-grain sandalwood smashed onto the ground and produced a thunderous boom. As Princess Zhonglu had exerted too much force, the 2 doors slid straight into the courtyard along the ground paved with flagstones. A group of tens of young men, who were practicing their martial arts in the courtyard, let out a miserable howl, as their ankles and tibia were broken by the door. They fell to the ground holding their calves and howling miserably. The incident happened too abruptly. On the spacious square, over 3,000 young men, who were lifting stone weights, playing with barbells, hitting wooden stakes, and practicing their martial arts, all stared blankly at the entrance. Although it was a spacious square, and there were several thousand people, none of them uttered a single word. It was not until two burly men who were guarding the entrance were sent flying into the courtyard by Princess Zhonglu that the several dozens of young men who stood closest to the entrance roared out furiously. "Which blind fool dares to come to our martial club and court death?" Before their words could fade away, miserable howls came from the entrance, one after another. Princess Zhongli's personal serving ladies, Baizhuer and Baizuer, rushed down from the coach with a beaming smile on their faces. Imitating their mistress, they kicked all the burly men who were guarding the entrance into the courtyard one after another. Although these two little serving ladies did not have any combat experience, they were, after all, female officials who enjoyed a very high status in the imperial palace. They had taken a lot of spirit pills, and their cultivation base was at the peak of the Hotian realm. How could these burly men who were guarding the entrance withstand their kicks and kicks? Relying on the power of Princess Zhonglu, these two girls were used to being lawless and out of control. Therefore, they did not know how to control their strength. Princess Zhonglu only managed to knock out the teeth of two burly men, but their kicks nearly broke all the internal organs of these burly men. Mouthfuls of bright red blood kept spraying out from their mouths, and very soon, a small puddle of blood was formed on the square. A series of clanging noises rang out, as nearly 100 apprentices of the martial club pulled out all kinds of blades, spears, swords, and halberds from their weapon racks, cursing furiously as they charged toward the entrance. Some reckless young men even roared out, "Let's see where these few girls came from. Chop the men behind them and feed them to the dogs, then we can use these few girls to warm our beds. Brothers, let's go. Whoever succeeds will be the first one to have his way with these three girls." These apprentices, who were sweating profusely in the square of martial club and practicing some low-grade outer martial arts, were born in the marketplace, and had been infected with countless bad habits. Relying on the fact that they had the advantage in numbers, these young men kept spewing obscenities like a rainstorm towards Princess Zhonglu, Baizhuer, and Baizuer. Upon hearing their words, Princess Zhonglu, who was beaming with joy a moment ago as if she was just playing a game, had her face turned livid with anger. Abruptly, there was a faint five-colored gleam flashing in her eyes. Waving her hand casually, Princess Zhonglu cried out in a stern voice, "Break all the limbs of these people, then throw them into the myriad red river to feed the fishes. Beat them, break their dog heads and rob this martial club. Let's rob this dojo. Today this dojo is the only one I'm interested in." Ignoring that she was wearing a cumbersome long dress, Princess Zhonglu raised her jade-like legs and kicked away a dozen apprentices who came near her. Then, she turned her head and said to Wuxia with a sweet smile, "Since you've taken a fancy to this martial club, are you going to rob it and open your own martial club? Just consider it as a gift from me. Later on, ask the officials of G City Mansion to get you the title deed of this place." In a fit of rage, Princess Zhonglu did not control her strength. Every single apprentice who was kicked away by her had their bones broken and tendons torn, with blood gushing out from their 7 apertures. Before those apprentices, who had charged forward with the courage and vigor, could see the actions of Princess Zhonglu clearly, they had been knocked away by their fellow apprentices. Nearly 100 of them were lying on the ground, struggling and wailing. It was a very embarrassing situation. Meanwhile, a large number of men brought by Wuxia had rushed forward. They picked up specially made sticks made of white wax, each half the length of an adult's arm, and began smashing and beating these apprentices on the ground. Their limbs and joints were broken, and many of their ribs were broken. It was especially true for those few experts from the palace guards. These apprentices had insulted Princess Zhonglu right in front of their faces, and it had scared them out of their wits. At this moment, with the order given by Princess Zhonglu, they struck a deadly blow on these apprentices, aiming their long sticks at the vital spots of those young and strong men. In just a blink of an eye, several dozens of apprentices had been killed, and nearly 100 were severely wounded. They were dragged out of the entrance of the martial club by Meng Xiaobai and his men, and thrown onto the street. For a moment, the mighty martial street was filled with crowds of people. Countless wandering knights and warriors were rushing towards martial club, impatiently waiting to see who was so bold as to challenge Sir Martial Club. Upon witnessing the ferocious and imposing manner displayed by Wuxia and his men, numerous apprentices on the square gathered together, looking at them with both anger and fear in their eyes. When an expert made his move, he would be able to know the actual situation of his opponent. As there were so many warriors of Xiantian realm and peak stage Hotian realm in Sher Martial Club, these apprentices had a very broad vision. Naturally, they could tell that these several hundred guards brought by Wuxia were all top-notch warriors of the Hotian realm, and were not people they could afford to provoke. A loud, muffled shout that sounded like a thunderclap rang out, as a burly man, who only had a piece of cloth wrapped around his crotch area, revealing his snow-white muscles, and had 9 exquisite tattoos of fierce tigers embroidered on his body, each with different expressions, dashed out from the crowd of apprentices. The 9-feet-tall burly man stared at Princess Zhonglu and shouted, "May I ask what is the purpose of visiting Sher Martial Club, miss?" Princess Zhonglu tilted her little chin up proudly, her eyes rolling up to the top of her head. She snorted coldly and said, "Are you deaf? I'm here to challenge your martial club. The geomancy of your martial club is pretty good, and the land is big enough. I've taken a liking to it." Wuxia had fully performed the image of a henchman. He fished out a gold ingot from his sleeve and threw it on the ground, smiled at the burly man and said, "Anything our miss has taken a liking to, we've never failed to get it. Either you ask Sher Tianma to come out here and discuss with us, or you can buy the land of your Sher Martial Club with 3 taels of gold." 3 taels of gold, you've made a big fortune. The tiger-striped man was so angry that his face turned blue. The piece of land occupied by Sher Martial Club on Mighty Martial Street was very large, and it was Sher Tianma who had spent 3 years of painstaking effort in challenging all the martial clubs, convincing all the leaders of those martial clubs to sell their land to Sher Tianma at a very low price. 90 years had passed, and along with the reputation of Sher Martial Club, the value of this mansion could no longer be measured with money. Yet he wanted to buy such a large piece of land and so many houses and buildings on it with just 3 taels of gold? This was daylight robbery. The burly man sneered. He gave Princess Zhonglu a look, shook his head, pointed his finger at Wuxia and snapped, "If you want to seize the foundation of Sher Martial Club, you'll need to have the ability to do so. If you want to meet our old master, you'll have to defeat us, the instructors of the front yard." With a loud roar, the muscles on the burly man's body bulged. With a forceful stomp, he shattered 2 stone bricks on the ground. His eyes went wide as he let out a tiger roar, thrusting his fist towards Wuqia's chest. This burly man had a much better moral standing than those apprentices of the martial club. When he saw that Princess Zhonglu was a girl, he was too lazy to fight with her. Instead, he chose Wuxia as his opponent. Before Wuxia could make his move, Meng Xiaobai, who had just dragged a few apprentices of the martial club and thrown them out of the entrance, had already rushed towards Wuxia with a loud shout. "Defeat Xiaobai first, then you can fight my elder brother." A stream of white gas sprayed out from Meng Xiaobai's mouth, and he let out a long roar that sounded like a bull. The muscles on his body bulged up at a high speed. With a shake of his body, a deep, muffled, thunderous boom rang out as he raised both of his fists and thrust towards the burly man. A loud boom rang out, as Meng Xiaobai and the burly man had exchanged a solid punch. Meng Xiaobai was knocked 7 to 8 steps back while coughing blood, while the burly man's chest was left with an inch-deep mark of a fist. He stared blankly at Meng Xiaobai, as his body slowly went limp. After that, blood began to ooze out from all 7 apertures of his body. Both men exchanged a punch. Meng Xiaobai was severely wounded, while the burly man's heart meridian was crushed and killed on the spot. A hideous smile appeared on Wuqia's face. He grabbed Meng Xiaobai with one hand and slowly injected a thread of innate water energy into his body, helping him dredge his meridians and digest the clotted blood. While doing that, he cried out with a stern voice, "Who else? If no one dares to come forward, then ask Sher Tianma to come out and talk to me." With an unsightly expression, all the apprentices of the martial club took a few steps back, but none of them said a word. Wuxia gave Yi Yan and these apprentices a glance. Suddenly, behind this group of apprentices, he saw a man that he had never expected to see. That day when Wei Xiaoxiao paid a visit to Lu Qingfeng, this man was one of the guards who stood beside Wei Xiaoxiao's coach. Together with a few attendants, he was standing behind the crowd, staring at Wu Qi with great astonishment. Right when Wu Qi saw him, this man immediately spun and left. Chapter 122. Seeing the guard of Wei Xiaoxiao turn around and flee, Wu Qi did not have the time to figure out why he was here. From Meng Xiaobai's waist, Wu Qi pulled out a sharp knife that all the villagers of Meng village had a habit of carrying with them. With a shake of his hand, he threw the knife towards the man. Along with a sharp whistling sound, the sharp knife pierced through the air. The handle of the knife smashed forcefully onto the back of the man's head, causing his upper body to lean forward and fall to the ground while foaming at the mouth. "Hey, our young miss has personally come to challenge you. Who dares to run away? Who dares to run away? If Shi Tianma doesn't show up, all of you will die." Wu Qi glared at those apprentices in front of him and scolded them with a stern voice. Zhao Chenzui's eyes shone brightly. When he saw Wu Qi had purposely knocked out that man, he hastily brought a group of ferocious guards and dashed forward, dispersing the apprentices in front of them with sticks. After that, they tied up the guard and a few followers beside him and brought them next to Wu Qi. The few men who stood together with the guard struggled and roared, but Zhao Chenzuo just let out a loud shout and gave them a round of beating. The few men were badly battered, and their faces were swollen and bruised. All they could do was cry out in pain, and none of them dared to utter any more curses. The secret agents of Scouting Office acted quickly. They rushed forward and tied the joints of these few men with ropes made from cow tendon, then gagged their mouths with strips of cloth that came with a strange smell, and dragged them to the back. A few instructors of the martial club dashed out, pointing their fingers at Wu Qi and shouted, "How presumptuous! This is the honorable guest of our clubmaster. Why are you tying him up? Let them go, quickly let them go. Children, surround this group of people who don't know life from death." Following the scolding of these instructors, a large group of apprentices of the martial club pulled out their weapons, or picked up some stone chains, wooden sticks, and some other weapons. Slowly they formed a circle, surrounding Wu Qi and his company in the middle of the square. On top of the wall of Shi Martial Club, more and more warriors came out to watch the show. These martial artists who were eager to see the world in chaos were either sitting on the wall or lying on the wall, laughing and pointing at the scene. Someone even blew a sharp whistle, pointed his finger at them and cursed at the top of his voice. "Cowards of Shi Martial Club! They are here to challenge our club. According to the rules of the Jianghu, we should fight them with real swords and spears. Are you trying to bully us with numbers?" Wu Qi laughed out loud. He cupped his fists and bowed to those warriors who were watching from the top of the wall. "Thank you for speaking up for justice. Today, our young miss has taken a fancy to the property of Shi Martial Club. Therefore, she has brought all of our brothers here to challenge the Martial Club and seize the place. I hope all of you can be our witness. If we can defeat Shi Tianma today, this Shi Martial Club will be ours." All the warriors on top of the wall burst into loud laughter, one after another, agreeing with Wu Qi's clamor. Someone had come to challenge Shi Martial Club, and this was a rare scene. Therefore, these warriors were eager to see the fight turn into a river of blood. Therefore, they kept cursing at Shi Tianma, cursing him as a cowardly old turtle, who only knew how to bully those adventurers who did not have any power, and when a real tough guy came knocking on his door, he could only cower and tremble in fear. Amidst the chaos, 4 of the 8 ghost immortals who were disguised as servants had blended into the crowd, stealthily sneaking into the backyard of Shi Martial Club. Under the bright sunlight, all the escape techniques of ghost immortals who had cultivated themselves into een deity with the body of a ghost had lost their effectiveness under the bright sunlight. Therefore, they could only take advantage of the chaos and sneak into Shi Martial Club. With their current attire, they looked no different than any servant from an ordinary influential family. Therefore, they did not attract any attention from other people. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was still making a loud clamor, insisting on the so-called rules of the martial world, and asking the people of Shi Martial Club to come out and fight with him. However, those instructors on the scene were not the ones who could make the decision. They could only order all the apprentices to form a huge circle and surround Sher Martial Club, constantly compressing the space for them. None of them dared to answer Wu Qi's question, as they were not qualified to decide the future of Sher Martial Club. Whistles and clamor rose from all directions, and those warriors who came to watch the fun became even noisier. Since the experts of Sher Martial Club did not show up, the fact that nearly 3,000 apprentices had surrounded a few hundred warriors who came to challenge the martial club was a very big deal. If this matter were to be spread out, the reputation of Sher Martial Club would be tarnished to a great extent. These warriors kept yelling and cursing wantonly, even cursing 18 generations of Sher Tianma's ancestors. Right when the atmosphere was getting tenser and tenser, a long and sonorous cry that towered into the clouds was suddenly heard coming from a few courtyards of Sher Martial Club. A deep and powerful voice suddenly rang out amidst the long cry. Which junior dares to be so presumptuous? Who dares to stir up trouble in Sher Martial Club? You bunch of useless fools, get the hell out of here now. The last word, "get the hell out of here," was like a muffled thunderclap. Nearly 1,000 warriors, who were either standing or lying on top of the wall, cried out in alarm at the same time. Blood sprayed out from their ears, as they lost their balance and tumbled down from the top of the wall, nearly dying from the fall. Accompanied by the loud cry, a group of over 20 men, each clad in a long black robe, with various weapons hanging on their waists, walked slowly out from the hall at the far end of the square, led by an old man. All the instructors on the scene immediately breathed out a sigh of relief. They smiled and said, "Young Martial Club Master is here, we can finally put our minds at ease." Greetings, young Martial Club Master. Sher Wugo, the only son of Sher Tianma, was an expert of Unity God tier of Xiantian realm, and enjoyed a great reputation in the martial world of Ji City. After all, it was extremely difficult for a warrior without any background to cultivate into the realm of Xiantian realm, let alone breaking through the respiration tier of Xiantian realm, and stepping into a higher realm. Unless the disciples of the 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty possessed a perfect legacy of cultivation, and also possessed a spirit root that was more suitable for cultivation, it was nearly impossible for an ordinary warrior to cultivate into the higher realm of Xiantian realm. As a warrior, it was said that Sher Tianma had cultivated to the peak of embryonic breath realm of Xiantian realm, and Sher Wugo had also reached the realm of Unity God. In the martial world of Great Yan Dynasty, both father and son could be considered as the supreme grandmasters. Therefore, when they saw Sher Wugo, all the instructors and apprentices of the martial club immediately spread out and lined up neatly on both sides of the square. They no longer looked as tense as before. Sher Wugo's stature was not tall, about 6 feet tall, clean and skinny. His white hair and beard were tied into a bun with a red string. It was said that he was more than 100 years old, but Sher Wugo's complexion was smooth like a young man's. He looked exactly like the so-called white hair with a ruddy complexion. He was clad in a black long robe with wide sleeves, and a long sword that was almost as tall as his body was hanging on his waist. He took one step at a time, and came before Wu Qi in a steady manner. Disdainfully, he gazed at Wu Qi, who had used a mystic technique from Scroll of Stealing to conceal all his aura, and the ripples of his inner energy were only at the meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm. Sher Wugo shook his head. He gave Princess Zhonglu a sidelong glance. Princess Zhonglu had retracted the 5-colored divine rays within her body, and her aura was muddled and hard to detect. Sher Wugo could barely sense that Princess Zhonglu had a cultivation base of meridian cultivating tier or higher, but that was all. He snorted coldly, then cried out in a deep voice, "So you are the ones who injured my disciples? Fine, I want all attendants and personal guards to cripple one of your own arms, and this little girl will have to kneel in front of Sher Martial Club for 3 days to atone for her crime. After that, she will give me a generous compensation for the medical expenses of my injured disciples. You young men have no idea of the immensity of heaven and earth. Luckily, you have come to Sher Martial Club and met a kind man like me. If it were any other martial club, you would have suffered a great calamity." Sher Wugo had put himself in a very high position, But Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli did not appreciate his kindness. Upon hearing his words, Princess Zhongli could not help but sneer and say, "You want me to kneel for 3 days to atone for my crime? In all my life, you are the first old man who dares to talk to me like this." An ominous gleam flickered in Princess Zhongli's eyes. She fiercely sized up Shiwugo's skinny body, trying to figure out where she could strike first to give him a hard time. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was carefully sizing up Shiwugo from top to bottom. A warrior of deity innate tier? This Shiwugo had obviously attained the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, and he was at the peak of it. Especially Shiwugo's skin, which was glossy and smooth to the point that it looked a little strange, and there was an abnormal green hue underneath his skin. Obviously, he was cultivating with some strange cultivation technique that focused on tempering his corporeal body. How could he be a legendary warrior? A bright gleam of 4 different colors flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. He had seen through Shiwugo's cultivation base. If not because there was a special cultivation technique in Scroll of Stealing that focused on cultivating one's eyes, perhaps he would have been fooled by Shiwugo today. The cultivation technique he was cultivating with was extremely strange. Although the innate energy in his body was not very strong, all the energy was gathered in his fleshly body. By a rough estimation, the strength of Shiwugo's fleshly body was at least 10 times stronger than the current Wu Qi. After injecting his innate energy into his eyes, Wu Qi could clearly see the dazzling light emitting from Shiwugo's intrepid fleshly body. He couldn't help but shake his head. No wonder Lao Ai told Princess Yingchuan that the person who assassinated Yan Buji was related to Shi Martial Club. Judging from Shiwugo's current condition, how could he be a warrior? Behind him, there was at least an existence that was equal to the 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty. Fortunately, Lao Ai had been operating in Ji City for so many years, and even the Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, had become his disciple. If not, who would have thought that a martial club in mighty Martial Street would have the courage to assassinate a duke of the dynasty? Sighing lightly, Wu Qi fished out a total of 300 explosive talismans, which were produced by Heavenly Spirit Sect, from his storage ring. He threw the talismans, which were tightly bundled with a red string, towards Shiwugo. With a quick reaction, Shiwugo grabbed the thick stack of paper with one hand. "What is this? Why are you giving this to me?" Shiwugo looked at the explosive talismans, which were tightly bundled with a red string, and could no longer be identified. Then he turned to look at Wu Qi with great astonishment. He hefted the bundle of explosive talismans in his hand. It looked as light as a feather, and there was no scent or poison on it. It didn't look like a hidden weapon used to assassinate someone. Without hesitation, Wu Qi grabbed Princess Zhongli's little hand, spun and sprinted away. After running several hundred feet away, with a thought in his mind, the thick stack of explosive talismans in Shiwugo's hand exploded abruptly. The raging flame swept across an area of 1,000 feet in circumference. Shiwugo was shrouded in dark smoke from the explosion, and was sent flying backward. Blood that was pale green in color, and sticky like ink kept spraying out from his broken body. The group of over 20 Xiantian warriors who followed behind him didn't even have the time to let out a miserable howl, before they were ripped into pieces by the explosion. Those apprentices of the Martial Club, who lined up neatly in the square, were howling miserably. Although they were quite a distance away from the center of the explosion, the power of 300 explosive talismans exploding at the same time was extremely domineering, almost comparable to the power of an upper-grade, 9 Heavens Thunder talisman, which was drawn by a human immortal of Jin Dan realm from Heavenly Spirit Sect with all his energy. Nearly 1,000 apprentices of the Martial Club were thrown into the air by the shockwave, and were thrown several hundred feet away. It was a complete mess and blood was everywhere. A long howl that sounded like the howl of a wild beast was heard coming from the backyard of the Martial Club. A stiff, cold, and emotionless voice was heard coming from afar. "Who dares to hurt my son, my disciple? Hand over your life." A strong gust of wind tore apart the flame produced by the explosion of the explosive talismans, as a tall and burly figure appeared before Wu Qi, carrying the severely wounded Shiwugo. Chapter 123. Shi Tianma, the owner of Shi Martial Club. Different from his short and scrawny son, Shi Tianma stood nearly 10 feet tall and burly, so muscular that he looked like the human form of Xiongqing and his brothers. His hair was so dark that it shone brightly, as if it was a black hole that absorbed all the light. His skin was strangely pale, so pale that it looked lifeless and lifeless. However, just like his son, underneath his skin, there was a very light green hue. Bringing along a strong wind, he dashed towards them from the backyard. After shattering the flame and airwaves produced by the explosion of 300 explosive talismans with a single punch, Shi Tianma's aura rose to a higher level. An invisible strong wind was coiling around his body, pressing towards Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu without ceasing. When he dashed towards them just now, he lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, shattering all the 2 feet thick stone bricks on the ground into powder. Wuxia could see and hear everything clearly. When Shi Tianma was dashing, he did not use any innate energy, but purely relied on the strength of his fleshly body. Yet his speed was almost the same as the speed of an ordinary Jin Dan flying sword. On top of that, when he was rising and falling, his footsteps sounded like muffled thunders, extremely heavy. His body weight was also much heavier than an ordinary person. Judging from the sound of his footsteps, the density of his body was at least 30 times that of an ordinary person. And the density of his body could be compared to an iron that had been tempered 100 times. How powerful was the power contained in a body like this? Wuxia had no doubt that this guy could even use his fleshly body to fight against the spells and flying swords of a Jin Dan human immortal. However, he did not have the strange signs that a Jin Dan human immortal should have. His cultivation base should be at the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm. But the strength of his innate energy was at least 100 times stronger than his son, Shi Wugo. The innate energy in his body was nearly compressed into a mercury-like substance. What an evildoer! What an evildoer cultivation technique! Gingerly Wuxia looked at Shi Tianma. His right hand was tightly gripping Princess Zhongli's little hand, shielding her behind his back. A strange four-colored gleam was flashing in the depth of his eyes, as he was carefully observing every movement of Shi Tianma, fearing that Shi Tianma would suddenly lay his hands on Princess Zhonglu. 4 ghost immortals walked up slowly, and stood beside Princess Zhonglu guarding her. 4 pairs of deadly still and gloomy eyes were fixed on Shi Tianma. Shi Tianma, who had a handsome face and looked to be in his 30s, was carrying his son, whose body was badly damaged by the explosion, and was dripping with blood. He roared furiously. What kind of grudge does Wugo have with you? Junior, how many explosive flame talismans did you use to injure him to this extent? Yu. Forgetting to talk with Wuxia, Shi Tianma let out a few furious roars, then hastily sprayed out streams of green mist from both palms, slapping forcefully onto Shi Wugo's body. Then he took out a few dark green pills, which emanated a strong scent of grass and wood, and made Wuxia feel dizzy after smelling them. Then he stuffed them into Shi Wugo's mouth. Very soon, the wounds on the surface of Shi Wugo's body began to heal. The healing speed was so fast that no one could believe that he was still a normal human being. Wuxia glanced at the few dark green pills, and from their smell, he could tell that they were a few extremely poisonous herbs. These herbs were mentioned in Scroll of Stealing as well. Not only were they extremely poisonous, they also contained a strange force that could temper the fleshly body and stimulate the potential of one's body. However, these herbs were not meant to be consumed by humans, but were used by some evil cultivators to refine various demon beasts as pets, so they could be used to guard their sect. Yet, Shi Tianma had actually fed his own son with this strange pill, which was called Beast Body Pill. Was it because both father and son were demon beasts that had transformed into human form? Or had they been refined by someone using an evil cultivation technique? In Wuqi's mind, the latter possibility was more likely. After all, for demon beasts to transform into human form, they had to form their demon cores like Xiongqing brothers. Without cultivating into a demon immortal, they could only maintain their beast form. Looking at Shi Wugo's wounds that were healing at an incredible speed, Wuxia said coolly, "This is the best kind of explosive talisman that Heavenly Spirit Sect sells to the public. 300 of them were detonated at the same time." This kind of explosive talisman costs 60 gold coins in the market. In order to injure Sir Wugo, I've spent quite a lot of money. Princess Zhongli did not have the concept of money. She poked half of her face out from behind Wuqi's shoulder, smiled and said, "That's right, 60 gold coins for one explosive talisman. And 300 of them would cost 18,000 gold coins. Even 18,000 gold coins could not kill a man. It seems that the explosive talisman of Heavenly Spirit sect has been diluted." Yen Bugue, who was standing aside with the secret agents of scouting office, nearly fell to the ground. He looked at Wu Qi with a bitter expression, shaking his head. That was 300 explosive talismans, and he just threw them all at once? Although they were the lowest grade talismans of Heavenly Spirit sect, they still cost 18,000 gold coins. Yen Bugue kept murmuring to himself, as he had no idea where Wu Qi got so much money. He knew that Wu Qi bought 200 explosive talismans from him for the first time. But when did Wu Qi get his hands on 300 explosive talismans? Both Princess Zhonglu and Yen Bugue had different reactions to Wu Qi's extravagant spending. Shi Tianma was so angry that his body was trembling. He cried out with a stern voice, 300 explosive talismans. What grudge do you have with my son? Is it worth it for you to use such a method to injure him? Who exactly are you people? Are you here to challenge the Shi Martial Club? Shi Tianma had also come to his senses. Both Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli did not look old. And it was not the result of taking some medicinal pills, or using some evil cultivation technique to maintain their youthful appearance. Instead, they were truly young boys and girls. None of them was older than 18 years old. Yet, both of them had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm. Needless to say, they had a very solid background. Detonating 300 explosive talismans at once just for the sake of beating someone up was not something an ordinary person could do. Putting aside the fact that 300 explosive talismans were worth over 10,000 taels of silver, who in their right mind would actually bundle up the talismans and detonate them? One explosive talisman could severely injure a warrior who had cultivated his internal energy, and 10 explosive talismans could severely injure a Taoist of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. When 100 explosive talismans exploded at the same time, it could even threaten the life of a human immortal like Jin Dan. Would an ordinary person take the risk of being killed by the explosion and detonate 300 explosive talismans at once? It was not only a rich and overbearing act, but also a hint of insanity. Judging from the way Wu Qi acted, he did not look like he came from an ordinary warrior family. Even those wealthy and powerful merchant families who had been living for generations would never be able to cultivate someone like him. Judging from the way he acted, he did look like a warrior with blood and iron in his veins. And he was definitely an elite who had crawled out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. And here was the problem, as Wu Qi looked to be younger than 18 years old. How could he possess the temperament and experience of a warrior with blood and iron in his veins? The raging Shi Tianma forced himself to calm his mind. Deep in his eye sockets, a pair of eyes gleaming with a strange green gleam was fixed straight at Wu Qi. Shi Wugo struggled hard in Shi Tianma's palm, groaning and yelling, asking Shi Tianma to avenge him. If not for the profound cultivation technique practiced by him and his son, which made their fleshly body much stronger than ordinary warriors and cultivators, he would have been blown into pieces by the sudden attack launched by Wu Qi just now. Although he reacted quickly and exercised a defensive mystic technique to prevent his fleshly body from being blown into pieces, his internal organs were still severely injured. "Dad, kill them. Capture that little girl. I want to teach her a good lesson." Shi Wugo screamed with a hoarse voice, glaring at Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu with a ferocious gleam in his eyes. Shi Tianma stretched out his hand and pressed on Shi Wugo's mouth. He stared at Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu and snapped sternly, "Who are you? Why are you stirring up trouble in my Shi Martial Club? Although I'm a little overbearing when I'm in Ji City, I've never offended any noble. With your cultivation base and—" Shi Tianma gave Meng Xiaobai and the others a glance, sneered and said, "Neither of you have guards that ordinary people can have. If I may ask, which one of you have offended?" Wu Qi did not say a word, but a strange gleam was seen flowing in the depth of his eyes, as he kept staring at Shi Tianma. How much blood essence did it take to temper such a strong fleshly body? No matter what kind of evil cultivation technique Shi Tianma had cultivated to achieve what he had today, there was no doubt about the strength of his fleshly body. For others, Shi Tianma's fleshly body was useless. If it were to fall into the hands of some evil cultivators, it would be a good material for them to cultivate all kinds of battle tools and puppets. But for Wuxia, Shi Tianma's fleshly body was simply a great tonic. With such a strong and powerful fleshly body, how much spirit energy and spirit could he have? If he could capture Shi Tianma alive, Wuxia would be able to borrow the energy essence in his body, allowing him to quickly break through the stages of meridian cultivating and body strengthening by using the source of Earth chapter, Wood chapter, and Fire chapter. Currently, Wuxia's fleshly body had the word soft. If he could complete the body strengthening of Earth, Wood and Fire, his fleshly body would be able to possess the heaviness and firmness of Earth, the flexibility and longevity of Wood, and the vigorous vitality of Fire. He is indeed a good thing. We can't let him go. Wuxia was gazing at Shi Tianma with a strange gaze. It made Shi Tianma's heart turn cold. If Wuxia was not a lunatic, it would mean that Wuxia was looking down at him with a condescending look. If Wuxia was not a lunatic, then he definitely had something to rely on. Shi Tianma fixed his gaze on Wuxia, suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and cried out, "Who are you? Why are you causing trouble in my martial club? If I have offended you in any way, I'm willing to apologize to you." The surrounding disciples burst into an uproar. When had they ever seen Shi Tianma admitting defeat in such a humble manner? He was the strongest grandmaster of martial arts in Ji City, so why would he lower his head and admit defeat to two young men and women who came to cause trouble? Wuxia still didn't say a word. With a strange smile on his face, he kept staring at Shi Tianma from head to toe. But it was Princess Zhonglu who couldn't bear it anymore. She leaped out from the crowd, laughed and said, "Why am I causing trouble in your place? Ugh, I'm not. Ugh, I've taken a fancy to this courtyard of yours. Sell it to me for 3 taels of gold, and you can go wherever you want." Just now, when Wuxia said he would buy Shi Martial Club for 3 taels of gold, Princess Zhonglu could still remember it until now. Shi Tianma paid no attention to Princess Zhonglu, who obviously only knew how to stir up trouble. He stared at Wuxia and asked in a cruel tone, "Why are you not talking? Are you waiting for something?" Before his voice could fade away, the ground of Shi Martial Club suddenly trembled a few times. A muffled explosion came from the backyard. Vaguely, one could see a large number of bricks, tiles, and stones flying high up into the sky. At least 7 to 8 buildings were blown up into the sky. A couple dozens of human figures were ripped into shreds amidst the airwaves and broken bricks. Looking from afar, a great number of broken limbs were falling down from the sky like raindrops. Shi Tianma's expression changed abruptly. He cried out with a stern voice, "Who broke through the formation of my secret chamber?" From the direction of the backyard, ghost howls soared into the sky. 4 grayish-white, translucent human figures were seen shooting up into the sky. Countless broken objects were brought up by the chilly wind, flying messily together with these 4 human figures, flying straight towards Wuxia. Accompanied by an ear-splitting ghost howl, a white human figure carrying a few objects flew straight towards Wuxia. "Mr. Wuxia, here is the identity token of Duke Yanlu, and it is sealed with a few layers of restrictive spells." "The identity token of Duke Yanlu?" Wuxia sneered. Shi Tianma's face fell instantly. He hugged his son and sprung up into the sky like a cannonball. Chapter 124. Without any ripple of magical energy, Shi Tianma sprung up into the sky, relying solely on the muscle strength of his legs, and leaped up into the sky like a flea. An ordinary man could jump 3 feet high, a warrior of the Hotian realm could jump 30 feet high, and a Taoist of Xiantian realm could jump 1,000 feet high, by riding on the wind. Shi Tianma leaped up into the sky purely with his muscle strength. What Wuxia heard was a thunderclap, and a dark shadow flashed before his eyes. In the next moment, Shi Tianma had already leaped over 5 miles high. In just a snap of a finger, Shi Tianma had leaped up 5 miles high. He let out a long and sonorous cry and thrust his right arm forcefully towards the sky. A white air barrier shot out to a distance of 3 to 5 miles. Borrowing the counterforce from the explosion of the air barrier, his body turned into a dark shadow and fled towards a far distance. Every movement of his consumed only the strength of his fleshly body, as he did not use any of the innate energy in his body. 6 gusts of chilly wind towered up into the sky. Just as Shi Tianma's body had traveled less than 1,000 feet, the 6 grayish-white chilly winds had already coiled around him. Suddenly, ghost cries rang out in the sky, as the sky was filled with green phosphorescence and chilly thunderbolts the size of a human head. The densely packed thunderbolts kept exploding and shattering the clouds in the sky. Countless drifting clouds spread out in all directions, leaving behind long trails of cloud in the sky. Shi Tianma roared furiously, thrusting his right arm out again and again, forcing those ghost immortals to keep retreating. It was near noon, and the scorching sun was shining high up in the sky. The overall strength of these ghost immortals had been weakened to the extreme. The combined strength of 6 ghost immortals was merely equal to the strength of 2 ghost immortals. The strength of Shi Tianma's fleshly body was mighty and tough. Although it was a secret evil technique, the attribute of his strength was of pure yang, which was a perfect counter to these ghost immortals. The chilly thunderbolts unleashed by 6 ghost immortals bombarded Shi Tianma, yet they could barely entangle him, and had no way to fight him face to face. Wherever Shi Tianma's fists passed, the chilly wind would be torn apart, and the thunderbolts would shatter. Occasionally, when his fists landed on the bodies of these ghost immortals, the ghost immortals who had transformed into their original forms would let out strange cries, transform into countless chilly winds, and flee several thousand feet away. When they regained their original forms, they would unleash the chilly thunderbolts and pounce towards Shi Tianma once again. These ghost immortals had made up their mind. Even under the scorching sun, they did not hesitate to consume their energy and unleashed wave after wave of chilly thunderbolts, entangling Shi Tianma and preventing him from escaping. Shi Tianma, who had an extremely strong fleshly body, but was not an expert in divine abilities or magic, slowly descended from the sky. He knew some methods to control the wind, but these little tricks of the Xiantian realm couldn't let him fly around in the sky like these ghost immortals. While holding his son, who was coughing out blood due to the violent impact, he fell down from the sky. After that, a dozen or so thunders exploded behind him, sending him flying back to Shi Martial Club and landing heavily on the square of Shi Martial Club. 9 Origin Sealing Imperial Decree. In the void, 6 ghost immortals let out shrill and shrill cries. 9 grayish-white beams shot out from the top of each of their heads, looking as thin as a spider web. Together with an evil wind that blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth, they came pressing down from the sky and enveloped the entire Shi Martial Club. 54 wisps of white mist weaved into a large net, which kept absorbing the energy gushing out from underground. Gradually, it transformed into a grayish-white light shield that hovered above Shi Martial Club. A couple dozens of green runes, each several tens of feet in circumference, were faintly visible within the light shield. A bizarre aura that made one feel cold and powerless was rising slowly from underground, drilling into one's body through the soles of one's feet. Apart from the men brought here by Wuxia, all the instructors and apprentices of Shi Martial Club were shivering from head to toe and fell to the ground. The blood and chi on their faces faded away quickly, and soon, their faces turned as pale as a dead man's. No matter it was the ordinary apprentices, the instructors of Peak Stage Hotian Realm, or the instructors of Xiantian Realm, none of them could survive under the light shield. Shi Tianma let out a furious roar. He hugged Shi Wugo tightly, swung his arm and thrust out his fist. In this punch, Shi Tianma had exerted all of his abilities. The innate energy in his body burst out along with ear-splitting noises. Abruptly, a clump of dark green light burst out from his right fist, transforming into a gigantic fist that measured several tens of feet in circumference, thrusting towards the grayish-white light shield. A muffled boom rang out, as the green fist collided forcefully with the light shield. The fist exploded, and a small hole of a few feet in diameter was torn open on the light shield. Stomping his feet, Shi Tianma was about to bring his son and rush out through the small hole. However, Wuxia had moved as well. He pointed his finger out, and a wolf howl soared into the sky. 7 dark wolf heads, each the size of a human head, leaped towards Shi Tianma while emanating an eerie cold air. There were 49 wolf heads on the sword of greedy wolf, and according to the number of great divination, it had endless magical functions. However, as Wuxia dared not to expose his cultivation base of Jindan realm, he could only control the sword of greedy wolf with the cultivation base of meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm, and could only produce the most basic 7 wolf heads. The sword beam moved at an incredible speed, as the 7 dark wolf heads, each dragging a 10 feet long dark tail behind them, bit fiercely on Shi Tianma's body. The wolf fangs bit down viciously, producing a large amount of sparks on Shi Tianma's body, and producing a loud noise that sounded like metal clashing. Upon hearing the noise, Wuxia could not help but feel his teeth turning numb. How strong was his body, that it could cause the wolf heads transformed from the sword of greedy wolf to produce such a noise. However, a corporeal body was after all a corporeal body, and the sword of greedy wolf was a flying sword of lower tier magical treasure level. The 7 wolf heads bit fiercely on Shi Tianma's body, and the razor-sharp wolf fangs sank deep into his body, while leaving a large amount of sparks behind. The moon-swallowing greedy wolf grand formation of 9 serenities soul-devouring formation was activated. Several dozens of dark streams shot out from the wolf mouths, squeezing into Shi Tianma's body while producing jarring and strange howls, crazily extracting and devouring his enormous blood and energy essence. Sizzling noises lingered without an end, as Shi Tianma's body, which had just sprung up from the ground, fell heavily to the ground once again. The 7 wolf heads attached to his body looked like 7 huge holes on a high-pressure airbag. As a result, the energy in Shi Tianma's body was completely depleted, and how could he still jump up? The dark airflow kept bringing out streams of dark green liquid, each as thick as a bowl, from Shi Tianma's body. The 7 wolf heads were howling joyfully, greedily digesting the dark green blood and energy essence, turning them into the power of the sword of greedy wolf. Shi Tianma let out a wild howl of pain. He stamped his foot fiercely, causing a large sheet of dark green flame to burst out from his body, pushing the 7 wolf heads away from his body. However, these 7 wolf heads were transformed from flying swords. Although they were pushed away by the flame, the razor-sharp wolf fangs still dragged and scratched on Shi Tianma's body, immediately ripping off a few pieces of blood and flesh the size of a bowl. With a flash of dark light, these pieces of blood and flesh were ripped to shreds, and the enormous energy essence contained in them was completely absorbed by the sword of greedy wolf, turning into a pile of ash that slowly fell to the ground. Then 6 dark green thunderbolts, the size of a water tank, descended from the sky and hit on the top of Shi Tianma's head, who was howling in extreme pain. The thunderbolts refined by ghost immortals had a very low explosive noise, and the explosive force was not too strong. However, the vicious phosphorescent thunderbolts were specialized in damaging the nascent divinity and blood essence of the cultivators. Struck by the thunderbolts, Shi Tianma's body trembled immediately, and blood burst out from his 7 apertures. His innate energy was extremely strong, and his fleshly body was incredibly strong. However, as he cultivated with a very strange technique, the strength of his soul was only slightly weaker than a warrior of peak Hotian realm. Struck by the thunderbolts unleashed by a ghost immortal who had formed his ghost core, Shi Tianma threw his head back and let out a miserable howl. Large amounts of green blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and he fell to the ground immediately. Shi Wugo let out a shrill cry. He sprung up to his feet, grabbed Shi Tianma and carried him on his back, clenched his jaws tightly, and randomly picked a direction and sped away. He was still trying to find a way out of death, but suddenly, he heard a loud clang. Princess Zhonglu had pulled out an iron stick from nowhere, dashed to his back and gave him a heavy smack. Shi Wugo rolled his eyes and fainted on the spot. Wuxia turned his head over, and all the secret agents of scouting office and palace guards on the scene had turned their bodies as well. No one dared to look at the scene where the most honorable princess of Great Yin dynasty gave someone a heavy smack from the back. Only Baijuer and Baizuer were clapping and cheering with a silly and naive look. Princess, what a clean smack. Hee. Although this Shi Wugo is very strong, he was still knocked down by Princess with just a single strike. Princess Zhonglu tilted her chin up. She was about to boast about herself with a complacent look on her face, when she suddenly saw the strange expression on Wu Qi and the others' faces. Hastily, she threw the iron stick far away, put on a gentle, graceful, and shy posture that made her look like a water lotus flower, and carefully walked behind Wu Qi. With a shy smile on her face, she lowered her head and stood still. A miserable howl was heard coming from a far distance. An unlucky disciple of Shi Martial Club was hit on the head by the iron stick thrown by Princess Zhonglu. His head was badly bruised and bleeding, and half of his teeth were knocked out. It was unknown whether it was because of fear or the severe pain, but this disciple of Shi Martial Club suddenly burst into loud sobs. Princess Zhonglu's expression changed slightly. She stared at the disciple with a flustered and exasperated look, stamping her feet fiercely and shattering the floor tiles within a circumference of several tens of feet into powder. Wu Qi cleared his throat and ignored the little action of Princess Zhonglu. He took over the identity token handed over by the ghost immortal and began to carefully examine it. The color of the token was dark green, the favorite color of the nobles of Great Yin Dynasty. The token was engraved with patterns of wind and clouds, and underneath it was a vast ocean. Between the ocean and the sky, a few swallows could be seen flying. On the back of the token, a few characters were engraved with gold. Buji, Duke of Yanlu. Everyone look carefully. The evidence is conclusive. This Shi Martial Club is closely related to the death of the previous Duke of Yanlu, Buji. Men break Shi Tianma's shoulder blades, pierce through all 36 special acupoints in his body, and detain him. All the disciples and instructors of Shi Martial Club will have their cultivation base crippled and be sent to the prison of West Wind Guard of Scouting Office. Each of the 5 Wind Guards of Great Yin Dynasty had their own prison in Ji City. Among them, the prison of Central Wind Guard was the largest, and the security was the strictest. But how could Wu Qi dare to throw these criminals into Qin Qingshui's territory? He could guarantee that once these people were sent to Central Wind Guard's prison, in less than 3 days, they would either be killed, or all the credit would be given to Qin Qingshui. So why would he send benefits to his enemy? Currently in Ji City, only the West Wind Guard that Lu Qingfeng and Wu Qi could rely on was the West Wind Guard under the rule of Yan Jiahui. A large group of secret agents from West Wind Guard of Scouting Office had rushed over after hearing the news. Skillfully, they crippled the cultivation base of all the instructors and disciples of Shi Martial Club, then tied them up with specially made ropes and threw them into prison wagons that came rushing to the scene. With a total of 1,000 prisoners, they were sent to the prison of West Wind Guard. Wu Qi ordered the ghost immortal who sneaked into Shi Martial Club, broke into the secret chamber and found the token, to lead the way. Along the way, in a serious tone, Wu Qi told Princess Zhonglu and his entourage, "Everyone listen carefully. I've taken a fancy to the foundation of Shi Martial Club, and with the help of Princess Zhonglu's power, I want to annex Shi Martial Club and open my own martial club in Ji City. By accident, I found out that Shi Tianma was related to Yan Buji's death. Everyone, you have to find out the cause and effect of this." Princess Zhonglu stared at Wu Qi with a puzzled expression. She had no idea why he was making such a solemn confession. However, she didn't get to the bottom of it and interrogate him in detail. Instead, she just displayed the dignified bearing of a princess and fiercely threatened all the people behind her. She swore in front of all these people that if anyone dared to not follow Wu Qi's order and dared to talk nonsense, she would definitely make all 9 generations of that person regret that they were born. With Princess Zhonglu's tyrannical behavior, Wu Qi thought that perhaps this confession could be concealed from Lao Ai and Yan Xianxian for some time. But it was hard to say. Lao Ai, that peerless evil man, had been operating in Ji City for so many years. Who knew if he would discover something behind this? While he was pondering, they arrived at Shi Tianma's secret chamber. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.